Go ahead and have a seat. If I might ask, if anyone has a cell phone, go ahead and cut it off, including myself. I want to welcome everybody to the House Public Safety Homeland Security meeting. Today we've got several bills up on the calendar. First up, House Bill 803, Mr. Benton. I understand you have a substitute. Could you give us the number of that substitute to be sure we're all on the same page?
Yes, the sub is LC 410187S.
All righty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you allowing me to come before you again. I was going to bring you a little popcorn because I figured you might be here too long, but figured you might drink up all your water. So, what we have done with the substitute, I don't know whether you've got a copy of the original bill or not, but what we did on the sub was that we have deleted the last full line on the original bill that says law enforcement agencies which do not comply with the requirement of this code section are subject to the withholding of any state funding or state administered federal funding. We have deleted that. On the second page, we deleted section D and E and F, and we have gone back with another D that we added. And we simply said all peace officers except for retired peace officers shall complete the training as provided for in section little b of this code section. And we went on to say that such law enforcement agency of the council shall determine if a peace officer has successfully completed the training within the required time. And that's the bill.
All right. Any questions of the author from the committee members? Might step aside. Anyone wish to address this issue? And brevity is of a prime importance.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know you've had a long day. I'm Deborah Nesbitt. I represent the Association of County Commissioners.
Rishi Patel with the Georgia Municipal Association.
We support the concept of the bill and providing additional training. However, we are concerned with Section 2. We have no problem with setting the guidelines and the procedures and policies so that the police officers get trained in these in this area. But we would like to see the Section 2 removed. You want to add anything?
Would you like to tell us why you'd like to see that removed?
Well, we would like to see it go under post and become a part of post, the way that they structure and develop their curriculum for all police officers. We think that would be a better way to go because there are examples throughout the code and other specialized areas where the training is done by post through the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. Do you want to add anything?
For instance, the Georgia state law has provisions on human trafficking or family violence where the post actually creates those standards, and we think that's a more appropriate place for training to be developed.
All right. Any questions from the committee members? All right. Anyone else wish to address this issue? Pro or con? Committee members? If I might make a recommendation before we move for entertain a motion. You know, we have heard this bill once, and I think we certainly do understand the concern that the author has with this. At the last meeting, I think it became very evident that we're talking about something that could have a physical impact on agencies to do this. While we all know that no one should intentionally inflict harm on somebody's pet, unfortunately, according to the numbers, they probably do it. Would the author consider a suggestion from the chair? You can stand there. Section 1 basically says that local law enforcement agencies shall adopt written policies set forth in discussions, I think, with the Chiefs Association. The Chiefs Association has voluntarily said that they would step to the plate and they would issue these policies to their people so that those city police officers and such, I'm probably sure that other law enforcement agencies would do the same as far as sending out some sort of a policy statement to their folks about dealing with domesticated animals. Would the author, would it be of concern, would he be favorable if we struck Section 2 at this time, pass Section 1, give this a chance for the next 12 months to see if this has an impact, since it obviously wouldn't have a fiscal impact doing it this way? Would he consider that?
I would consider that. The reason that we reworded and went to the sub is through my discussion with Hundo and also with Colonel Safe Trouble, that felt like that the agencies themselves could do a better job than running it through the academies or anything else.
Which is basically what lines 18 through 23 would do. So you probably wouldn't have any objection to striking Section 2. With that being said, what would be the will of this committee?
I concur.
All right. Recognized for a motion.
I would like to move. So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Any discussion? Amendments offered? Mr. Glanton.
On clarity, so we're moving, striking Section 2 or not?
No, we have a motion and we have a second. Now it's open for discussion, and this would be the proper time to entertain a motion to amend. And the chair would be more than grateful to hear a motion to amend from someone.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to amend.
Can't tell you how much I appreciate that. We have a motion to amend the substitute 0187S to strike from lines 25 to 50 and leave in, of course, and renumber Section 3 to Section 2. Line 52 would remain. Line 51, Section 3 would be changed to Section 2 and eliminate Section 2. Would that be your motion?
That would be my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank God. We have a motion. Do we have any other discussion on that motion? Do we have a second to that motion? We have a second. Any discussion at this point? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposition? The ayes have it. We now go back to the original version. Committee substitute, House Bill 803, as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Mighty good to see you, Mr. Benton. Good bill. Now. All right. Let's see. Mr. Benton. Mr. Rogers, House Bill 872.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm bringing before you HB 872, better known as the Peer Counseling Bill. If you have the bill in front of you, there's a couple of quick things that I think that we need to do. If you look at line 25 under Section 1, it says...
Author of the bill, if you could, go ahead and explain your bill.
Okay, very simply.
And then any possible amendments that you'd like, then you can explain your
Okay,
amendments.
that'd be great. Thank you. It's very simply, it's a peer counseling bill, Mr. Chair. The purpose is to establish a statutory privilege or confidentiality between trained peer counselors and law enforcement employees and their immediate families when they're receiving counseling from a trained peer counselor. designated by the head of a law enforcement agency. There are already trained peer counseling programs in place, and I have with me Lieutenant Andrew Carrier, who can answer questions about those peer counselors should the committee have them.
Lieutenant?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this to me is a no-brainer. There's a reason why we in law enforcement have an average life expectancy of 59 years old. Depending on what study you read, it's somewhere between 59 and 64. Annually, we have 150 to 170 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. Take that number, multiply it times 3, that's how many take their life every year, somewhere between 300 and 500 every year. There's a reason for that. The average 10-year veteran, the divorce rate is at 72%. There's a reason for that. Alcoholism among police officers is twice than that of the national average. Domestic abuse is twice the national average. The time is long come that we do something about that. And if you've been in battle, there's a couple of people here that I know have been in wars. When you get back, you don't want to talk to anyone about it unless you've been there, because you're the only ones that get it. It's about normalizing reactions and normalizing what you've seen, what you've been through. Part of the reason that we want to present this is you trust the people that you talk to about it. So I want to talk to you. If I've been involved in a shooting, and I know you've been involved in one 2 years ago, I want to come talk to you, and I don't want them to know about it. That's the bottom line that why we're here.
Mr. Holcomb, you have a question?
It was before you spoke, I was going to ask this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I was going to ask what the purpose behind it is and why it needs to be legally confidential. And I think that you explained that in a way, which is to give space for people to know that the communications that they have dealing with difficult personal experiences, that they will be maintained in confidence, and so it will encourage people to have discussions about these very challenging issues.
Correct. And maintained in confidence for all the right reasons. There certainly is, you can see there are some exceptions, and we would go by those exceptions if an exception ever came up.
All right. Mr. Bland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I like the bill as well. But I do have a question for you. Is there a standard for training, meaning time of training, weeks, hours, across the board in the state for these peer counselors? And the reason I ask that question is because if you're a small law enforcement agency versus a larger one, the ability to afford it would be different. And so is there a centralized training? Is it coming under a centralized agency or something of that sort? So that we're all standard throughout the state?
Yes, sir. The curriculum, the Georgia State Patrol is the first state police / highway patrol agency in the nation to become nationally certified by the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. We attained that certification about 4 months ago. And that curriculum is what we go by. The GBI is going through that process right now, as well as some other smaller agencies throughout the state. And that's the standard that we're using. And that's why it's so important that in this bill, the word train needs to be in there. But that's the curriculum that we're pursuing through the ICISF.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Right ahead.
So if a smaller agency, maybe out in rural Georgia somewhere, who can't afford to go and adopt their own curriculums and do this training, would they be able to train through your agency?
They could. They need to get the training. If you look in the right places, you can get it pretty cheaply. But you have to be trained. In other words, you can't go out there without having the training, and in my opinion, have this fall. You know what I'm saying? You won't be able to use privileged information, privileged communication, unless you're trained.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions at this time? Representative Hitchens.
Haven't you provided this service to smaller law enforcement agencies already that haven't had the ability to train counselors?
Yes, sir, we have. We've trained the Richmond County Sheriff's Department, and they started their own peer team as a result of a tragic line of duty death that they had 3 years ago, and several other departments as well. Last year in Augusta, we provided a 3-day what's called a post-critical incident seminar, and we trained officers from 6 states, including Sandy Hook, Connecticut, Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook, and 14 years after the fact, Columbine, Colorado. 3 people that had never had any kind of psychological aftercare whatsoever. So yes, through the PCIS, sir, we've had people that came to that seminar and left 3 days later better than when they got there. And we also have one a month from now in St. Simons, same thing.
All right. Any other questions? Questions of the committee? Let me ask you a question, because I know what my distinguished colleague is going to ask. Was this, did y'all take this language of creating this legislation? Was this from a template that other states are
Absolutely, yes, sir. There currently there's 11 states right now that have something very similar to this. Ours is modeled after North Carolina, and if you look at every one of them, I have several other states right here. They're all pretty much the same. Some of the language varies a little bit, but when it comes down to brass tacks, most of them are the same. The only exception would be Mississippi, and they have a penalty should privileged confidentiality be violated. That's basically the only difference.
So then, if I may ask, then there's no intent in here by establishing a system of this peer process. There's nothing in here as an attempt to give immunity from that if a peer had knowledge of anything criminal to
Absolutely not.
Anyone else.
At that point, all bets are off. Let's say, for example, you and I were in, say, a debriefing, and you told me about the admission of a crime by you or someone else. At that point, everything stops. And, you know, we don't, at the end of the day, we don't take off our law enforcement hat to be a social worker. That's our first priority, is being a law enforcement officer first.
Thus is the reason on line 25 that they can still be compelled by court order.
Exactly.
So there would be no need in the author having any further worries about amending his bill.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're quite welcome, colleague.
the law school.
That makes it a whole lot easier, doesn't it? Any further questions? All right, if y'all would step aside. Do we have anyone here that would, excuse me, Mr. Holcomb?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I do have one question, a substantive one. On lines 28 and 29, it uses the phrase official duties. It states that communication was made when the peer counselor was not performing official duties. I just want to make sure that that's broad enough. And so if somebody isn't actually like on duty at that time, does it still cover them if they come in and they're off that day but want to come and talk to somebody?
Yes, sir. It would also be similar to the language color of law, or acting under the color of law.
Okay.
If I'm acting under the scope as a peer counselor, then that would fulfill that.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions of the committee of the gentleman in the well? At this time, do we have anyone else who wishes to address this issue? Thank you so much. Y'all good, gentlemen? Y'all might want to step aside. All right. Any questions from the committee? What is the wishes of the committee?
Move to pass.
We have a motion, do pass. Do we have a second? Do we have any further discussion or any possible amendments to be offered? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposition? None. The ayes clearly have it. Representative Rogers, wherever you went.
I was,
Oh, there you are.
excuse me, I was talking with Representative Holcomb about it.
You did a good job on this bill.
Thank you. I had a.
You feel a whole lot less stressed now than you did an hour and a half ago.
Yeah, I feel that one. Yeah, that was not the way I would phrase it, but yes, you're correct.
You thought you saw a glitch as big as a booger in a haint, and you come to find out it wasn't a glitch, didn't you?
Representative Powell, it's a good thing we've known each other for a long time, sir.
Let's maybe the copies. All right. All right. House Bill 779, Representative Donahue. We would sort of get prepared while we sort of sift through. I got way too much paperwork up here, so just sort of give me just a second. right, if you would, Representative Donahue, House Bill 779.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, our committee, I thank you for giving me the opportunity for House Bill 779. And this started off as a license to carry weapons temporary renewal permits and mandamus so as to follow certain military personnel and military veterans to be issued a weapons carry license without the payment of fees to provide for related matters, to provide an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws for all other purposes. Chairman and I had spoke on this bill, and I told him I was willing, after quite a bit of research, to be open on this. I just think that we have men and women that are here today that pretty much risk their life in our public service and our veterans. One of the things I wanted to look at was giving them a little reward, so I started making quite a bit of calls throughout our counties. What happened was I started realizing that a lot of people in certain municipalities, they give this free to certain veterans. Now, that's not half. I'm saying several counties do. For instance, here's some of the results. Carroll County, they usually take $80.25 in an application for renewal. The retired law enforcement with 10 years of service pays only $7 for a card fee. Everybody said that's the fee is $7. I pulled up Cobb County, and their usual fee is $79.25. A retired law enforcement with 10 years of 12 years pay is a $7 fee also. Hall County is at $74.25. We have $7 card fee, and $38 is what they say their cost is, so that comes to $45. Lumpkin County is $44 is what they reduced the fee from, well, they saved $27 because they make any officer pay $44.25. This goes on and on to where several just charge $7, some are $30, some are free, and all I want to do is try to find a happy medium. And I talked with Mr. Chairman, and I said, I'm open to do something to give back to our people. Number one, these are renewal permits. What we're asking for is we can either opt out and let each municipality say, we'll decide what we do, but then have a charge of $30 as a maximum. That would be something that I would think would be, good for the goal I'm trying to reach here. But we have military people and these officers that are in here that they shouldn't really have to have a renewal fee. Every day, they're here risking their life for us. Excuse me, and I've got some kind of dry throat or something, so.
Give us just a second. I want to take a look at this. Julius, if you might.
Mr. Chairman, could I hand you some more information just for you? Thanks.
Yes, sir. That's what I need. A little bit more paperwork.
No, this is just, it's already highlighted, just a couple that refer
You got
to
the
the
code
section.
book over there. Bear with us just a
No
minute.
problem, sir.
I want to be sure we're checking on something here. If I may, your intent is only for this to be in effect for veterans on the renewal. They will have already been issued their initial
Yes, sir.
permit.
That is true. Yes, sir.
All right.
And if our great bill of HB 875 passes, we won't need the fingerprinting because our fingerprints aren't going to change.
That'll be a moot issue anyway.
Yes, sir.
All right. Sitting there, I'm trying, as I was reading this bill, I was trying to figure out just exactly where this said in the code section, and we can't track it in the code section. We're specifically talking about a renewal. That's
Yes,
what we're trying to
Yes, sir.
track down. Council says if we're going to do that, we need to put some language, specific language, that we're stating this is only the renewal license, which means that on that first concealed weapon permit, that they would have to go through the whole process
Yes,
just like
that
anyone
is-
else. So,
And the
Very
bill,
well.
it states pretty much every 5 years that they would have to be subject to, if something had happened or
no,
any
they'll
charge.
still under,
Yes, sir.
if 875, which I suspect it will pass,
Yes, sir.
hopefully, knock on wood, that tends to that renewal period.
Yes, sir.
But still on the first application, someone still has to go through that
That's right.
process.
Yes, sir.
The full
That is
process.
true.
All right. Mr. Glanton?
I just have a quick, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this apply to military personnel that are residents of the state of Georgia?
This is pretty much for any military, that if they, number one, if they moved here from another state that they were serving at that time, they lived in Georgia, of course, they would apply here. If they lived in Texas, they would apply to Texas, but they could be born or live in Texas, and if they had another home here in Georgia, that would give them an opportunity to make sure that they're renewal wherever they're living at the current time.
Okay, and the reason I asked you that question is I'm retired military.
Yes, sir.
And quite a few folks in the military who may be a resident at this time in Georgia may not may not have filed for residence here in Georgia. They may have residency in a non-tax state.
Yes.
And so if they're in a non-tax state, that means they're not contributing to the tax digest of the state of Georgia. So have y'all considered that? Was that part of the conversation in regards to whether they should?
No, sir.
This should be their.
No, sir. No.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Representative Lunston.
Hugh,
Yes, sir.
in regard to your lines 23, 24, 25 regarding military personnel, are you including National Guard in that, or is this
Yes,
just
sir.
National Guard? Well, I'm not sure that the verbiage is clear there regarding that, if that is your intent.
Well, this here is pretty much for United States military.
I think he may have accidentally turned it off.
But it's a retirement. From the retirement, actually, it wouldn't be active. As it says here,
As I'm reading it, it says any person who has served
right.
with the United States military.
Yes, sir.
That's. Yeah, are you intending for it to be just honorably discharged?
Well, honorably
or anyone who
discharged
has
or anybody in served.
29?
Yes, sir. On A and B.
Okay. Still, the question is, was your intent to include National Guard? And if so, I'm not sure that language accomplishes that.
This would pretty much say military, so I would think would, and I apologize for it not being there, but would the National Guard would be under military? Yes, sir.
Yeah, there is a distinction within
Yes, sir.
that. We all think of military, including
Right.
National Guard, as military, but there are some distinctions there, which, based on that language, I'm not sure.
Yes, sir. And I
accomplishes what
would
your
say
intent is.
serving without the National Guard as this would be written.
I want it just in case we decide to do it. Just keep it. Just keep it. We might discuss that in a minute. It's all right. Just keep it. questions? You might stand aside. Let's see if we have anyone else who wishes to add to this. All right. We have someone from ACCG.
Good day, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate y'all allowing me to speak. This is I am Todd Edwards with the Association of County Commissioners, and I'd like to begin by expressing a sincere thank you to all those in the military that have given so much that I might stand here freely and express my opinions to you all today. We don't see this as a military bill, and quite frankly as a gun bill, and which, in all honesty, I haven't fared too well in front of the committee of recent. What we see this as a fiscal impact bill to the counties of the state of Georgia. It's going to have a significant impact. We don't have a fiscal note attached to this, but just a little bit about the fee systems. And Emory, our Representative Donahue, went over it quickly, but I talked with our probate court judges, and around the state, your basic cost for a concealed or a weapons carry permit is $74.25. Of this amount, $30 goes to counties or the probate court. That's the cost of administering the license. In addition to that, your local law enforcement can charge up to a $5 fee for fingerprinting. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's why you have the $5 fluctuations. The remainder of that $74.25 is a $44.25 charge by the state GBI to process the background checks. So $74.25, 30 goes to us, the probate courts, 5 fingerprinting, and the majority of it goes to the state to run the background check. What this would do by eliminating this fee, and when we're a fan of fees, we believe that fees should actually pay for these type of services, either those benefiting from them or those costing the government charges should pay for the responsibility, have the responsibility to pay through fees as opposed to us subsidizing it through taxes and the general fund. We do not make a profit off of this. We charge the fee for providing this service to the community. Our concern is by eliminating it that indeed property taxpayers would further be subsidizing this service, and also if you allow it for military moving forward, the other implications on who might also be provided a free license. Our suggestion for your respectful consideration is if the state would like to provide these licenses for free, somehow provided under the State Department of Public Safety or another mechanism. Another option that y'all were discussing earlier is, as you stated, the majority of this cost of $44.25 does go to the state. That could possibly reduce the burden on military personnel by eliminating the state's charge. But again, I'm here to look out for the fiscal interest of county. And I know this is just a small token. It's a small amount. But over the years, the bills add up, the costs add up, and they're having a considerable impact on Georgia County governments, considerably in these cost-cutting times. Revenues are short, and we're trying to do more with less. And I'm up here to ask, and your consideration is please not add this additional unfunded responsibility to the county taxpayers of the state of Georgia. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I would like to answer a question. I know that if 875 does pass, then the background check, fingerprinting,
Fingerprinting for renewals or replacements.
Basically, the $39 goes away.
Well, your $5 fee is that's for the fingerprinting. Now the $44, the bulk, would be your background check. But if it's a renewal, I mean, a cost-cutting measure could be to eliminate that charge, and if they've already got one, they may not need the background check. That's a possible cost savings measure that could be substituted.
Break down again. All right.
So we got $74.25 is the total amount. Of that 70, under statute, your probate court gets $30. They're the ones you go in, fill the paperwork, process the application, et cetera. That's $30. $5 fee to your local law enforcement for running the fingerprints. And then on top of that, a $44.25 fee. That's the current charge. Goes to the GBI for processing the background check. Now, the GBI can charge what they want, but that's what they're charging currently. So that's a total of $74.25.
That is basically when they do a fingerprint analysis and a GCIC report.
Now, there's additional costs, and I didn't want to get into that, but if you don't have your fingerprints taken by the GBI or the local law enforcement, you could have the local, the GBI substations, I forget which call them around the state. That's going to add $50 costs, and I didn't go into
Let me
that.
ask you, see if my math is working correctly.
Yes, sir.
If 875 passes.
Yes, sir.
In the renewal, and the summation that we had in that was that in the renewal, you didn't have to do the fingerprint anymore.
Correct.
Now, when you do a renewal, you take your hard copy of your concealed weapon permit.
Yes, sir.
To the probate judge with your application for renewal.
Yes, sir.
At that point, they simply run a GCIC, which anybody in law enforcement can do to see if there is if there has been any change in the status of that individual.
Yes, sir, and that's your $44.25 charge,
Where that's no money.
GBI.
Because the fingerprint, when they run the fingerprint, is where the actual cost comes into it.
I can't speak for the cost of what the state charges nor what they do with that money. My primary concern is the $30 to the probate court for the services that we provide.
So actually, what we're really looking at here in the renewal is actually the $30 fee.
As far as Georgia counties are
As
concerned.
far as the loss of any revenue would be the $30.
That is correct, sir. Mr. Chairman, sir.
So that's the magic number we're talking about. In that $30, what is included? Is that the cost of the
$22 goes to the county, the probate court. $1 goes to a retirement fund, and they have $7 here for the PCP. And if I can ask Rishi to hand me my yellow sheet of paper.
$7 goes to what?
The $7 here, and this came from the probate courts. It's a police and sheriff's press. So they call it in the PCP fund. So that's your $30. $22 to the probate, $1 retirement fund, and $7 to police and sheriff's press.
Police and sheriff's
Press, PRESS. And again, I'm not your experts here, but I did have the probate court supply this information.
Somebody with Sheriff's Department, Sheriff's Association here?
Mm-hmm.
So where is the actual card, that card paid for at?
It's part of the 30. Within that entire $30 is the cost of the card.
You know that $1 goes to the retirement fund.
Yes, sir.
And $7 goes to whatever this other add-on is.
The retirement and
So it
$7 police and
sounds
sheriff's
to me like
press. And
somewhere in here, we're narrowing this down unless law enforcement wants to lose $1 on the retirement fund. And you got $7 that goes to whatever this other fund is if they're willing to lose. If they're willing to give
Well, if it's
that
the
up.
sheriff, ultimately it's the county funds, and I'm here to represent the county taxpayer.
Is anyone here with the Sheriff's Association? Mr.
I mean,
Norris?
their budget does come from our budget.
So if we're in fact, if we've narrowed it down and we're talking about waiving that, we're basically talking about waiving a $30 fee for these veterans. What we're really-
I'm talking in opposition to waiving that fee, sir.
That's exactly, I mean, we've got it down to that. And $1 of that goes to the peace officers' retirement fund.
Mm-hmm.
22
I
goes to
might
the probate
suggest-
court, $1 goes to the retirement fund, is what I've got it.
I thought the dollar went to the probate court's retirement, not the police retirement.
That's the probate judge retirement.
I think so.
Give me just one moment, please, sir. The retirement fund, yes, I believe it is.
The probate.
But yes, ma'am. And the judge did send his regrets. He was here, but had to get back up to Forsyth County because of the session ran late.
All right. I've got a couple of, Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any sense of how many people we'd potentially be talking about here? I know that there's over 700,000 veterans in this state, so my understanding is this hasn't been tracked before, right? So do we have any idea so we could give an assessment of the budgetary impact of how many veterans we'd be talking about?
No, as stated earlier, the fiscal note has not been requested nor created for this bill. We don't have these numbers internally, but I can tell you on those communities, the courts that are surrounding our military bases would be very, very significantly impacted by this, more so than the others, but I do not have the statewide numbers without that statement.
Okay.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Representative Holcomb asked the first question I had. And the second one, I just want to address something you said with regard to fees.
Yes, sir.
And I understand and get what you're saying and where that's coming from. And to the chairman's point, a question about running through GCIC and local law enforcement doing that, I believe that's an avenue that we might could look at in terms of lessening the state's impact. But that being said, you mentioned that you're a fan of fees with the county doing that. A concern I have, and I'm in support of this bill, is we're applying a fee to an individual's rights. I mean, they already have this right. We don't apply a fee to, a pastor in a church to be able to speak. So with that said, I support this bill the way it is, but I would be happy to look at ways in which we can maybe offset some of those fees that the county would incur and or do it a different way to save the counties the money. But these folks are the people that have served our country or served our communities, and I would think we could try to figure out some way to move these fees. Would you be okay with that measure or some change there? I mean, would ACCG be in a better place to negotiate there, I guess would be my point.
Well, yeah, I mean, if any negotiation.
Let me ask something. You don't need to be asking him, is it all right with him?
Yes, sir.
He's not elected.
I would respond,
with regard to the...
You're absolutely right, and it's a fundamental policy discussion, the Second Amendment rights, the inherent rights. But as I heard from House Bill 875 floor debate yesterday, it was stressed continually, time and time again, that these are law-abiding citizens who have had their criminal background checks, fingerprint, those cost money. And it either comes to the fees or it's going to be paid for through other means. And
my question is,
fees should be paying for this.
Local law enforcement does this all the time. You get pulled over, you're going to be ran. I mean, it happens all the time. It doesn't cost what you're saying it costs. In that we can look at making some changes to meet the representatives' ends with this. Is my opinion, and that's, like I said. I mean, my initial question was the number, and I believe the representative has a number at how much that would be. The number with regard to who we're talking about here, but anyway, that was my main concern.
Yes, sir.
All right. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too like the bill. I am very in favor of our law enforcement and our service folks. However, we're here to be good stewards of the state's money and of the county's money, and I do think we can make a better decision if we have a better handle on how many dollars we're talking about and how it's going to affect our county governments. So I would like to request a fiscal note.
Cool. All right. Question from any of the other committee members? All right, if I may, at the prerogative of the chair, we have a recommendation of a committee note. If I might ask the author to do this, I'm going to suspend action on this bill right now, as opposed to laying it on the table. What I would recommend to do, go back and take a look at all these breakdown of fees. That's just me, but it's my suspicions that we're talking about. Basically you can sign a waiver for GCIC, and if there's no fingerprint involved, it's basically your local police can run a GCIC. That's basically what your probate judges can do on a renewal. So if we're talking about if 875 in fact does pass, then basically that renewal, that part of the $44 and something is going to be off anyway. That leaves this $30 fee. I think that's the parameters that we're going to be working for. What I would suggest that you need to do is you need to talk to the Probate Judges Association. Ask them, are they willing to waive that $1? Because that's exactly what it comes to, waiving that $1, this $7 fee to the whatever that other was. And then basically we have $22 that's left in there. And I would recommend talking to those folks, and we will probably be having a meeting of this committee, another meeting probably on Monday, and that way we can move forward at that time. We have Mr. Glanton.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a point here. I know you suspended it, but in case I'm not here Monday, I just wanted somebody to do an amendment to correct that typo online.
Yeah, there's a typo in the United States, and I'd also like to consider if you if you come
Line
up with some other
28.
language, that we also put a section C after 31, that these people should be a citizen of the state of Georgia. I mean, we've got folks that go back and forth between multiple states and a concealed weapons permit, while they certainly are eligible to get them in multiple to some states, but they need to be a citizen in the state of Georgia if we want to consider that. Would that suit you?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
That section, you want to keep that and look the section part I gave you. Find that as paperwork.
I'm sorry, the what?
I gave you on the section code.
Yeah, I'm going to give this to our counsel, because he's going to put some, if this comes back, there'll be some language that specifies that we're in fact talking about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, the chair is going to vacate the chair, and I'm going to present a bill. I'm going to turn this over to the vice chair to preside on this issue. No. 907.
Oh my gosh, I know. I just went crazy.
Keep me straight.
That's my job.
Do what now? Is it going to, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, you want to vote it today?
My intentions.
Okay.
You're in charge.
Thank you. I'd like to call House Bill 907, and that is the substitute number 287128S. Mr. Chairman, if you would explain your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like for you to look to be sure we have the correct substitute, LC 287128S. I'm going to give the background on this, and I want this to be very specific to those people who may be listening out there. I'm going to be calling on a couple of people. There's been a lot of people, a lot of work that's gone into this Bill 907. And we'll give these people due credit, and they're going to be presenting the intricacies of it. But I'm going to give you the general background of this. We are living in a changing society. You know, the days that we have taxi cabs and the limos, these are the things that we've dealt with by law and statute for many years. But because of technology, the smartphone technology, the apps that are applied today, is creating a lot of new and innovative business structures. One of those is called Uber. One of them is called UberX. One of them is called Lyft. There's probably several more out there I don't even know the names of. But I have no doubt that this time next year when we're standing here, there'll probably be 6 or 8 more of these innovative technology-based companies that they have in fact perfected, as pardon the cliche, a better mousetrap. These are transportation referral companies. Quite frankly, I didn't know until a year ago what Uber was. And I had the opportunity to go to dinner one night with a colleague. And I was bragging about, you know, how cool this was. That my colleague called, got on her cell phone and went to an app. And shortly here was a limousine that picked us up, took us to dinner. We had dinner. She did the same thing, and a different driver with another limo that wasn't obviously the same came back. And I thought, how cool this is. There's no money involved. Everything was put on her credit card. Very clean operation. Very courteous drivers. And, you know, I said, well, you know, it's a new day. This is all technology. That next day, I was in a meeting with the Department of Public Safety and the Commissioner, and matter of fact, a lot of the gentlemen that are in the back of the room here today the law enforcement officials, and we were dealing with a whole different bill, and I was bragging about this new business model called Uber. And that was when I was told that with the look, you know, this is right, this is a new day. But did you know that these folks are not complying with this law or the spirit of the law? That law enforcement has always required, and Georgia law has always required, that anyone who offers themselves as a for-hire driver of public conveyance is supposed to have a background check to ensure that they're not a felon, not a sex molester, not a former murderer, or someone such as that. Someone that has a clean driving record, per se, not multiple DUIs, something that had been always expected. And I asked them about this, and, you know, quite frankly, last year they thought, well, this is too late in the session, and we've got other agendas, and this is going to be a whole new ballgame. And I said, well, that's fine. We'll deal with this next year. Next year came around, and the Limousine Association had expressed concerns. The Taxi Cab Association expressed concerns, and I had called a meeting in my office, and I called all the players, and the representatives from Uber showed up, the local lobbyists that control theirs, the local lobbyists for the limo industry, the taxi cab industry, Lyft, one of the other players in the game, and they all showed up. And I explained it to them at that time that the goal of my interest was that this is new innovations, and I really was quite impressed. And even more so when I understood that this UberX and Lyft and all these other business models were different than the Uber business model. Uber was a limo with limo drivers, and I presume most of those are people who already are registered with Department of Public Safety as a, quote, limo driver. I can't imagine somebody just goes out and buys a Lincoln limo and starts hooking up to Uber. So then you have this new business model, and that tells me where we're going. And it seems to me to be a pretty good idea. But the one thing sticks in my mind is technology is driving the train, and it's driving and making a better mousetrap. And from somebody who comes from rural Georgia, I represent 3 rural counties where we don't have a taxi service. We don't have public transit. We don't have buses. We don't have any of this. And it dawns on me, what a great idea. This new technology is going to give somebody up in my part of the county, my towns or counties, somebody may want to be a Lyft driver or an UberX driver or whatever it might be, whatever the other companies may be. And as well as I thought about what a great deal it was, I also thought there's something that in the role of public safety, I really wouldn't be worth a snuff if I did not have concern about what my first duty as the chairman of the Committee on Public Safety is, and that's protecting the people of Georgia. And I had said at that point, and I believe it was relayed to all of the players that were there that day representing all of these different business models, that I said at that point, the only interest that I have is that any individual who is offering themselves as a driver to the public should have a background check. And I know that these companies do their own background checks. If you don't know about it, they got a great model. They'll send you the picture on your phone of who's going to be picking you up. And they do all of this with GPS coordinates of time versus mileage and all of that. But I said I still think that these people, it needs to be verifiable. You know, not that I think that Uber or Lyft or any of these other companies would deliberately skew the system and allow people that they hadn't done the background checks to do it, but still, they're not the government. These companies do business in places like California. I don't know where Lyft does business out of, wherever their home base is. But these people, as the point I want to make is, they're not in Georgia. So there is such a thing that we know of, hacking the system. So I think there's a system that we need to have a system of a background check, first and foremost for the public safety. I don't think that it would be incumbent on me to allow something to happen where someone is picking up your wife, your children, your daughter-in-law. Without that, no matter how good a system it might be, there's still a need for the old-fashioned way of doing background checks. Secondly, these companies also say that they have an umbrella, a requirement of an umbrella insurance liability coverage. That's fine. But what is the basic insurance? Is there base insurance on these vehicles? Something that this state has always had an interest in, to be sure that there is sufficient liability insurance of coverage. And then last but not least, the current state law is that anyone that is participating in operating their own business is supposed to be paying sales tax. Now, I don't know that these folks are paying sales tax. I wasn't nearly as concerned about that as I was the background check. And that's still part of my concern. So I will tell you a little bit about the system that each and every one of you members of the committee know. And I've been quoted as saying this a lot of times, that the legislative process is in fact a process. It's not an event. Now, a lot of y'all have took a whipping for the last several weeks. I've had 3 people who signed on to the original intent of the bill in good faith that have pulled their names from the bill. Some of them have told me, quite frankly, they did it because they were tired of getting negative and ugly emails from Uberites. A couple of them did it because they were concerned about the politics, because this is a very popular thing, very popular. Hadn't been a lot of truth, that, in my opinion, has been put out from the standpoint of saying that House Bill 907 had the intention of protecting taxi services, and that we had one goal, and that was to put Uber out of business. Well, let me tell you something. People say that about me. They don't know me very well. And I like this business model, and this isn't the first time y'all have heard me say this. I have said this at the last couple of meetings. I do have a concern, and I'm going to tell you, and probably the best example that I can give you, no matter how well I like this issue, I have a concern with technology to the point that we have a system of smartphone technology and a private referral business that's got people that are doing this business for them. But once you sign up, they have your cell phone locked in. But not only do they have your credit card information, they can always reach you. They're worse than any newspaper that can't tell the truth. They've got a venue of their own that they can communicate directly with their own citizens and their own members and people who use it. So they can put out any negative or untrue issue there is. But probably the one thing that concerns me even more about this whole process is that people are voluntarily giving up to participate. They're giving up their cell phone hooked to an app so that somebody in wherever it may be has got absolute and total control of knowing their whereabouts 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, by following them with the GPS coordinator in your phone. Now, I ain't saying that's a bad thing, but that's just how it is. And we're becoming a society of people who are blindly following and not thinking about the repercussions. Now, I'm not mad at a lot of the misinformation that's been put out there. I hate it for the standpoint of what they have done to a lot of good legislators for putting out a lot of misinformation. I hate it because they have skewed the process. Because in the process, I don't think even the Uber representatives can say that they haven't been invited to sit in. Or if they have, they're certainly going to have an opportunity to talk about what a terrible fellow I've been up here in a few minutes. The Lyft folks, this guy sitting on the front row, he's flown in here today from wherever in the world he came from, but he came in here just for this, and he's been here before. And I don't think there's anyone that can say in the process that they did not have a chance to sit down and participate and to offer it up. Now, I've talked about the background of this, and I've talked about the bill. Well, the bill is about 10 pages. And I'm going to let y'all ask specific questions to a couple of the guys that helped to write it. And that's one of the guys with one of these companies, and one's with the limo folks. And nobody with the taxi folks has helped to write this bill. But I'm going to give you the general gist, and I'm going to let them stand up here and answer specifics to the question. You know, if you look at the first few pages, the first couple of pages basically allows for intergovernmental relationships between the Department of Public Safety and local law and state officials, and as such, as far as enforcing the law that deals with these public transit systems. There's a definition section in here. It's quite extensive, and it basically goes into the gist of doing a new definition for this new type of service. These transportation referral service providers. You know, so definitions, and you know, I heard one of the companies talk about, well, my gosh, why is it taking so many pages? Well, you know, we kill more pine trees up here with definitions than we do anything, and that's what this bill is doing. But it's got all the definitions in there, and it's a very simple bill when it comes down to it. The simple bill is we're using the current structure, that these referral service companies, that they'll be treated just like a limo company to the standpoint that they will refer, they will send electronically to the Department of Public Safety every month a list of who they got this driving in the state of Georgia and their contact information. We're even going to let them do a sworn affidavit that they've done their own background check that they seem to be so proud of. But I don't know why they really want to, because then they're going to be liable to be sure that they haven't made any mistakes. For the Uber folks who are already licensed, quote, limo drivers with a chauffeur's permit, we're going to allow that to stand for those, because them people are already scrutinized by the Department of Public Safety anyway. So we're not, in fact, reinventing the wheel, per se. We're just trying to do something in parity. We're not trying to do anything some of the folks has put out the misinformation about we're trying to step up here and save the taxi cabs, because we're going to have another new language that the official language of Georgia is going to be whatever taxi drivers speak. What we're going to do is we're going to basically look after the public safety with this bill. That's what we're doing. So we've got that part. Some of the members of this committee stepped in and raised the issue of, quote, a minimum level of liability insurance. That's put in there. We haven't dealt with the sales tax issues because, quite frankly, it's already the state law that they're supposed to be paying sales taxes. And the Department of Revenue will probably be calling some of you folks with Uber to find out if y'all been paying your sales tax. And I certainly hope they do, because as a business person, that's all of our obligations, that we pay what we're due and obey the law. And I think that's all we're asking for. So we didn't even include that. But at the end of this bill, what we did include was certain language about a study committee that will also be formed to look at this taxi cab, limo, and this new type of venue for public conveyance. Oh, I'm not exactly trying to protect the taxi industry. I think that it is time that they be deregulated and they be treated just like everyone else. And if that's what the will is of this committee and of the legislature. Madam Chairman, that's what I have. I'll stand for questions. I would like to introduce a couple of folks if they would like to come up. Reagan, do you want to step up, or Joe and Mr. Snyder? I'll be glad to ask the Uber representatives if they'd like to step up to see if they would like to answer questions or whatever point. If they have knowledge of the bill, or do y'all want to go over the bill and then just let these gentlemen, if they would come up, I'll step aside and let them
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will ask the committee if they have any questions, and I see we have one from Chairman Tolson.
Pretty well, Mr. Chairman. You've just done what I'd just like to know was two things, and I haven't finished reading the thing, but the companies that was involved, how many companies that are present here tonight that's involved in this new venue. Plus, how are they registered, licensed, or anything?
Mr. Chairman, what we have here tonight, Mr. Snyder represents the Limousine Association. Limo drivers in the state have been regulated by the Department of Public Safety now. Prior to last year, they were regulated by the Public Service Commission. And when we say regulated, they register with them the number, whoever their drivers are, and the vehicles, so that they're known.
Yes, sir.
The taxi industry is regulated by the municipalities and, I guess, county government somewhere. I mean, I would think. The only one I know, quite frankly, is the municipalities. And don't even get me into trying to discuss medallions and stuff like that. That's a little bit tricked up economics for this country, boy. I mean, I don't understand it, but I understand that this other is a good business. This gentleman here represents a company by the name of Lyft. There's two types of, the best I've been able to ascertain at this point, there's two types of these referrals. One is a company by the name of Uber that apparently started this, and they specialize in limousines. I think that you either have to have a black Lincoln or you have to have a SUV or something, maybe. I don't know, but that seems to be their model. And their drivers that all I've been able to find out, that they are licensed drivers with a chauffeur's attachment, Georgia chauffeur's attachment on there. That's the easiest one because they're already regulated. They're just using this referral service as a mechanism of doing business. This other group is a technology-based ride share. The only difference is when we say ride share, they're charging the people they're charging, and they all operate off of the cell phone. There's an app that goes onto the cell phone. It's all based off of GPS coordinates. There's no cash because if you're a participant, you give them your credit card number, you call them, they pick you up. You're charged based on time and distance. I mean, it's really kind of a nifty deal. So that's I have exhausted the extent of my knowledge about this, and that is probably way too much.
This is going to be an interesting one. Thank you, Chairman.
Would you like to come up with Mr. Snyder?
Members of the committee, my name is Les Schneider. I'm an attorney with Wimberly & Lawson, and as Representative Powell indicated, I represent the Georgia Greater Atlanta Limousine Association, the Georgia Limousine Association. As Representative Powell indicated, this bill is not intended to put anybody out of business. It is intended to make sure there is a level playing field where various types of transportation services are offered to all the citizens in Georgia, and those citizens pick which one they prefer, whether it's a taxi, whether it's a limousine, whether it's a rideshare program. All of them under this bill becomes a lawful event, and various requirements are done of that. As Representative Powell said, I'll just very quickly go over the key parts of the bill so you see it. As he indicated, sections 1, 2, and 3 are simply done to, if it occurs, the intergovernmental agreement, it allows for the state public safety people to enforce some of the local laws. It would allow some of the local people to enforce the state laws. But again, even though you pass this bill, if these two parties do not make an intergovernmental agreement, everybody just enforces their own law. Section 4 are definitions. I would just bring your attention to the new definitions that are a new concept that we're putting in. If you look on line 54, you will see ride share driver, and that more accurately describes the type of driver that Lyft would employ and UberX. And that would be somebody like your son or daughter or your wife or your in-law or whatever who wants to make some additional money, and they will drive for either UberX or Lyft or a number of other companies. Please keep in mind that a lot of the people that I represent, limousine carriers, also will be a transportation referral service provider under this bill, because they are not just in the business of driving people from point A to point B. They sometimes refer business to other limousine companies, or a taxi could refer it to other taxi cab companies. So they too would have to register under this bill. So this is just not about just Uber or just Lyft. It's all these companies that do it. And obviously, I'm sure you all understand this is a money business. So obviously, if I'm referring business to Representative Powell's limousine company, I'm sure I'm going to get a percentage, and he's going to get a percentage. Same way Lyft operates, same way UberX operates, and Uber operates. So all we're doing is we're codifying that type of business model, and you see that in line 64 through line 70. It's either A or B. B would be more of the Lyft or UberX model. A would be one limousine company referring to another, or a taxi company referring to another taxi company. Really, at the request of Representative Taylor, and it was proper, line 71 and 72 is an exemption. Anybody in emergency or non-emergency medical transports, they are not covered by this bill. That's a different matter. That's not normal day-to-day public transportation. Obviously, next section 73 to line 78 is simply reiterates Representative Powell's desire on the protection of the public safety. It does also make a very clear view now. In the interest of these transportation referral service providers and rideshare drivers, they are only going to be regulated by the state, just like limousine carriers are. They're not going to be regulated by local governments. And that was something that these folks requested, and it makes perfect sense because it's consistent with the model. The next section basically indicates that if you are a transportation referral service provider, then you register with public safety. And there is a fee attached to that of $100 a year. You, as Representative Powell indicated, you would simply register with them, and then you would provide the drivers who are working for you. But those drivers, that is a confidential information. It's not subject to open records, because it's not going to. We're not sure anybody's trying to steal anybody else's business model or anybody else's driver. The next section talks about, it starts about on line 100, and there are basically, as you can see, approximately 11 requirements of the transportation service provider. This goes to Representative Powell's point about making sure that if you're going to be one of these referral providers, then you're only going to refer it to, in the instance of taxis, only taxis that are already registered with a local government. You're only going to refer it to a limousine carrier that's already licensed with public safety. If you're going to use a rideshare driver, then it's going to be a rideshare driver that's on your list, and I will in a moment get to you how that rideshare driver is going to be endorsed by the state. You see there on line 122 to 126, there's a background check, and again, there's a little distinction on the background check for a shared ride driver. Everybody else who is in a limo or a car that's driven by a limo driver, those people would simply get the chauffeur's endorsement through the Department of Driver Services as it exists today. Zero tolerance as to drugs and alcohol. Certainly we don't want people driving who have a problem with drugs or alcohol. Insurance coverage. If you look on lines 132 through 140, basically, limousine carriers already have to have $300,000 if they have a vehicle of 12 people or less. If it's over 12 people, it's $500,000. Taxi services are already covered under the local law, under the chapter that you see on lines 138. We added, obviously, rideshare drivers. That coverage, which would be a coverage that would be maintained by the transportation referral service provider, in this case, let's say Lyft or Uber, it would be the same level of coverage as the limousine carriers would have, which again would be the $300,000 or the $500,000, depending on the size of the vehicle. You see the next ones really, again, relate to taxi services. I would bring your attention to number 10 on lines 149 through the next page, 1676. This was a request that the Lyft people brought up, and it certainly sounds very reasonable. They conduct a very extensive check of the automobile itself, for the vehicle that's being used. And they do this privately, and you can see the 19 points that they check on. And basically, under this bill, they would be allowed to continue to do that. And they obviously, those records could be, public safety could certainly review those records. But they would be allowed to do that. Driver training, you see on lines 177 through 184 for limousines or taxi services that presently exist. If you look at lines 186, in the case of a transportation referral provider relating to between a driver share program and those drivers, again, an outfit like Lyft or UberX would have their own training program. They would submit that program to the Department of Public Safety, and they would update it on an annual basis. Again, I think everybody can see there have been really no barriers for anybody to get into this business. The next section, starting on page 186, basically indicates that a transportation service provider, to make a long story short and cut through the legalese, it's basically saying that they're only going to contract with somebody who's either a licensed taxi cab company, a licensed registered limousine carrier, or an individual who has a driver share driver who has gotten the necessarily okay from Department of Driver Services, which I will review at the end of the bill because it's a little different than a chauffeur's endorsement. I bring your attention to lines 213 to 218. Under the present law, a limousine carrier, if they're doing any advertising, they receive a license number from the Department of Public Safety. By law, they are supposed to put that number on all advertising they do in the state of Georgia, so it alerts consumers that this is a licensed limousine carrier under the state, as opposed to a fly-by-night operation that doesn't have any such number. We certainly are just treating the transportation service providers the same, that if Uber or Lyft or a company like them does advertisement and it's on the print advertisement type, then basically they too have to put their number on there so everybody knows they're a legitimate company in the state of Georgia. Obviously, in this age of technology, if it's internet, then that does not apply to internet advertisements, for the practical matter that these folks generate advertisements through the net that may go out to 50 states, and sometimes they may not realize their particular advertisement will end up in the state of Georgia. So we made that exception. The next section basically describes what existing law is right now. As to taxi services, obviously, is a metered ride. Limousine services is either a flat fee or an hourly basis. A rideshare driver basically will be charging a fare based on time and distance. And the other issue, which has been raised by a number of people, is that if you look on line 237, that because of the point that Representative Powell made, where there may be a severe problem in terms of the amount of sales tax that this state is actually collecting every year, and based on the information that that I think some members of the committee have received, and certainly I've received, the Department of Revenue does not know exactly how much money is being collected. This is no smack on the Department of Revenue. We all know that their computers could use a lift, no pun intended. But the fact of the matter is that they just don't have the information. At best, they have said they can identify about $1.5 million. If we're dealing with over 6,000 vehicles in the state of Georgia, either somebody's lying or somebody's not counting real well. And I will get to that at the very end, but basically at this point, we felt it was important that all transportation service providers who are utilized by a transportation referral service have to accept credit cards in the payment for its services rendered. That doesn't mean they can't take cash, but it does mean that they have to provide credit cards. At least with credit cards, there's more of an audit trail than there would be for cash or non-payment in other ways. The next section is important, 40-1-196. Many of you may know that in Georgia, if you're taking your household goods, if a moving company is moving you from point A to point B, the moving company can't make you sign something and say they're not going to be responsible for your goods. We protect people in this state for their goods. So the feeling was if we can protect them for their goods, we certainly ought to protect them for their life. So therefore, there can't be a waiver that basically you say you're not going to be responsible for personal injury if somebody is in a vehicle and has an accident. So basically we have something in there that it's void against public policy if you try to get somebody to sign something saying they're not responsible if somebody has an accident. Normal rules and regs. Let me next go over with you on lines 250, because this is a very key part, because this is a departure from what we presently do. If you are going to be, if you want to be able to drive for a transportation referral provider, then you have one of two choices. You can do either one. As Representative Powell indicated, you can go to the Department of Driver Services, pay $15. Fingerprints, I think, are about $50 or $60, so I thought it was interesting your previous debate. It seems to go up every time somebody wants to go, and they basically pay $15 for a new license that, in essence, they will get an endorsement on the back of their license that says they have the chauffeur's endorsement. That allows them to drive commercially. That costs about $82 all told. Alternatively, if the transportation service provider wants to get their folks out on the road faster, we have come up with an alternative means so we don't wreck anybody's business model. And that model is as follows. You basically, as you can see, starting on line 261, they can perform their own independent background check. It includes the items listed from lines 264 all the way to 273. They make a determination whether or not that person is what they believe safe enough to hire, and then that person can start driving. That information within 60 days, this background check information, is sent to Department of Driver Services, and then they will come back and basically either say, yeah, fine, you were right, great background check, everything checks out or fine, or you know, you missed something in South Carolina in terms of this criminal thing that occurred, or you missed the 3 DUIs, you know, that occurred. And they will basically then inform the company, you need to pull this person. So we're balancing the business model that many, not just these two people to my right and left, but other people want to do as far as the business model. We're balancing that with the verification check that Representative Powell talked about to allow Department of Driver Services to verify what these companies have done. And again, it's not just these companies. The folks I represent have their own referral services, and they will have to do the same thing if they want to go that route as opposed to the chauffeur endorsement route. The information, again, is not subject to inspection or disclosure under the open records. Okay. One of the issues that was covered last session, you all allowed a license plate to be issued that says limousine or said taxi. Everybody, I believe, thought that when they passed that, it was obvious that you had to be a limousine driver or you had to be a taxi driver and licensed as such in order to get that license plate. Well, funny thing, not the case. And there have been people who have gotten that plate without either being a chauffeur and limousine driver or a taxi driver. So this part of the law on 298 to 301 makes it very clear that you cannot get those plates unless you have gotten you've either registered with the local government as a taxi driver or whether you have a chauffeur's endorsement from the driver services folks. Again, a public safety issue. There was an incident not too long ago in this town where 2 women were picked up in cars and Nobody knows the company. But at the end of the day, they wanted to go to X, but the driver took them to Y, and there was an attempted sexual assault. So I think there's a reason why we want to make sure that everybody could get a limousine or a taxi driver license plate. On lines 302 and 3017, as Representative Powell indicated, this is the study committee. Let me just be very upfront, and this is the one thing I think everybody agrees to. We are fairly archaic on our view toward sales tax right now. We are only one of 5 or 6 states that charges sales tax on transportation services. There's a lot of winners and losers when you do that, because some people collect it, some people don't, and then all of a sudden there's a competitive disadvantage, not to mention the bureaucratic problem.
Can we find the lights?
So as a result, this gives the legislature an attempt and an opportunity to perhaps come up with a better system, whether it's a decal system or whether it's doing it. But I think everybody in the industry would prefer that we go to a method other than sales tax in the future. But that is the law of the land now. Everybody, I think, up here respects that, and we understand it has to be done, but there is a lot of cheating going on, and we would like that to be eliminated by a better mousetrap, as Representative Powell said. Again, in finalizing this, let me say that, I think everybody's worked on this very hard. I know there's a lot of false information going out there. I think there was a lot of panic in the streets created that we were going to kill off technology or kill off an industry, and that's not just a lie, that's a big lie. And the folks that I represent are not looking for any clear advantage. I don't think the people to my right and left are looking for a clear advantage, but I do think we want a level playing field and as many options as possible for people to get from point A to point B. This bill puts everybody on the overground, not in the underground. And you don't have to worry under this bill. You should have a reduction of gypsy cabs or gypsy limousines or false operators or unlicensed people. And we have a better situation that I think we're doing this in a way we're not banning anybody, and the public can decide exactly who they want to use and when. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone on the committee have a question for the speaker? I don't see any. Thank you. If you would introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Joseph Opaku, and I represent Lyft Incorporated. Good evening, Chairman Powell. Good evening, Vice Chair Taylor. I want to thank everyone for their time today. I want to tell you a little bit about Lyft and how it came into being, because I know there's been a lot of questions about Lyft and how it operates. Lyft was founded in 2012, and it represents an innovative solution to a really age-old problem, that problem being that on any given day, 80% of the seats in cars go unused every single day. It is the greatest inefficiency in our basic mode of ground transportation today. So Lyft found an innovative and frankly a friendly and safe way to try to solve this problem. That's by maximizing the available seats in the cars of responsible, safe drivers like all of us here. As was mentioned earlier today, Lyft performs a very extensive background check on every single driver that seeks to join its platform. If that background check is passed, it then conducts a very extensive driving background check to make sure that there are no significant driving infractions on that driver's past. We do a very comprehensive vehicle inspection of every single vehicle that is sought to be added to our platform. We'll also do a drive-along with the potential driver to make sure that they are safe, courteous, and obey basic traffic laws. And then and only then may you be considered to be added to the Lyft platform of drivers. And all told, a relatively small percentage of the people who apply to be drivers on the Lyft platform are ultimately approved. So the drivers who do drive for Lyft really do represent the cream of the crop, the people who are the safest, the most cautious, the most courteous, who have safe, clean vehicles, and frankly, who will represent the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia quite well. We know that this is a new and a complex model, and as with anything in terms of innovation, there can often be a resistance to it or some confusion or concern about it. I want to make it very clear that safety is our paramount concern. This model does not work if safety is not our paramount concern. But every time that new regulation comes up, frankly, we are always a little bit cautious because there is a tendency to try to squeeze, as the saying goes, a square peg into a round hole. And to be frank, we were concerned when this process first got started because the initial draft was rather problematic for us. But I do commend the leadership of Representative Powell. He's made it clear that he does not seek to extinguish innovation, and that safety is his concern, so I do appreciate that. And we've come a long way from the initial draft. To be frank, I can't stand here right now and tell you that this is the perfect draft. A lot of the changes were made today, and frankly, I have to, we have a lot of people who have to look over them because this does not look like the draft that was in existence just a few short days ago. But I can say that we have made significant steps and that I believe that everyone's heart is in the right place to find some sort of balance between protecting innovation and ensuring the safety of the residents of the state of Georgia. So in closing, I'm here to answer any questions about the LIFT platform and the LIFT model. We do look forward to continuing with this process, but I do want to thank everyone for their time. I know this is not the easiest concept to understand or comprehend, but I do believe that it is the intent of this committee to just ensure the safety of the residents of Georgia and not to stifle innovation, and I hope in the long run that's the solution that we'll end up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I do see that we have a question. Thank you.
It actually doesn't stand for anything. LIFT is just the name that we chose to name the company with. It is not an acronym.
Thank you. Representative Atwood?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for your hard work, all you gentlemen, on this. I remember meeting with you and spending a lot of time. And I want to be sure that the other members of the committee that were not able to be there with us were able to hear your views in detail, and I appreciate you coming here. A lot of the information in this bill, I believe, was put in here primarily to try to fit within the business model that LIFT and others currently have. Is that correct?
I believe that's the intent. I would not presume to speak for Uber. I'm sure Uber would not presume to speak for Lyft.
And feel free, gentlemen, to jump in because I'm trying to be as judicious with your time as I can with my own. Okay, fine. If you kind of address that in your statement, I'd appreciate it. And I mean, if it was me, I would have a chauffeur's license, liability insurance, check the vehicle out and go on down the road. But we're trying to work within your business model because I certainly cheer you on. I love the concept. I love the concept of Uber and Lyft and all of it. I think it's a great idea, especially for metropolitan areas and in what you're doing. But we do also want to have a level playing field for everybody to compete equally, and I think that's a good thing. Have you got the bill in front of you? And
I do.
Mr. Snyder, you may want to address it. I was trying to go over this on line 54, 55. I noticed that in our ride-share driver, it means an individual who uses the individual's personal vehicle to provide transportation for passengers arranged through a transportation referral service. I'm wondering if provides transportation for passengers for a fee arranged through a transportation referral service. If you might want to address that ideas or that thought.
Sorry. You can go first.
Of course, this is after 5 committee hearings yesterday for me and a very long day today. I may not be thinking as clearly as I normally do, but I didn't. While I had you up there, I wanted to ask you about that.
Well, one thing, thank you, Representative Atwood. One thing that's a little bit unique about the Lyft model is that our drivers provide these ride-sharing services on what we call a donation basis. Mm-hmm. After the end of the ride, a suggested donation is generated based upon an algorithm that considers both the time and the distance, but the passenger actually has the right to change the donation either upward or downward, and frankly, if for some reason the passenger is not happy with the ride, the passenger can input 0 as a total donation. So to input the term a fee in that definition would not be 100% accurate.
Okay. That part I didn't realize. So they would, when you say they input back to the mothership, and then you would reimburse for lack of a better description.
For lack of a better term.
I mean, you're talking to a man who's roadkill on the information superhighway, okay? So I appreciate you telling me how it works a little bit more.
Sure. So after as Representative Powell said, everything is app-based. There's no cash transaction. If you sign up for Lyft, you have input your credit card information. You have an app on your phone. After the ride is over, you will get a message sent to your app with the suggested donation, and you have the right to, click an up button and move that up, or click it down, move the donation down, and you can move it all the way down to 0. And then if I can continue with that, another added feature, and again, I don't want to speak for Uber, but I believe they may touch on this as well. Another safety feature that we add on is that after the conclusion of the ride, the passenger has a chance to rate the driver on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, and anything less than 5 stars, the top rating, is going to prompt additional questions as to how the driver could have improved, whether in terms of safety, in terms of cleanliness, navigation, what have you. And depending on the nature of that concern, because this is all app-based and because this is all taking place in cyberspace, we have the ability to respond immediately. And if it's a concern that reaches a high enough level, we can shut down a driver's access to the platform literally with a push of a button. The only way you can get a Lyft ride is via the app. There are no street hails. So we have through this technology, we can be far more responsive to passenger concerns.
I appreciate that. I'm very familiar with Uber because I've ridden with them and like them. I wasn't as familiar with you, and I'm not completely dead. I do have an iPhone and many apps. So, but thank you for that, because I did not realize how that your particular venue worked in that area. That's good. It's very good. Thank you.
And just in further response to your question, you did indicate the original definition we had worked on did have the word for hire in it, but we took it out, and basically, obviously, now it's broader. So if there's a transportation referral service provider who's using shared drivers, whether they're charging them something or nothing, they still would be covered under the statute.
Fine. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay. Thank you. Now, if we can hear from y'all.
Chairman Powell and Madam Chair Taylor, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Louis Massey, and our firm represents Uber. And I want to thank Chairman Powell for the time that he has allowed us over the last few days. We've spent a lot of hours on it. Last night, on the way to my son's lacrosse game, I was on the phone the whole way up there with Les Snyder. Then I saw my son's team get beat 23-2. And then on the way back, talked to the client. So we had a long night last night. I want to introduce you to Keith Radford, who is the general manager of Uber Atlanta. And Keith is a Georgian. He grew up in Marietta, lives here. And he wanted to talk to you a little bit about Uber and HB 907.
Thank you. Chairman Powell, committee, thank you very much for having me. I'll keep this brief. I know you guys have been up many long hours trying to fashion this bill. We operate very similar to the Lyft model. You've heard a lot about Uber. You've heard about UberX. Uber is one company. UberX is obviously the ride-sharing offering. Uber Black, as we call it, is our partnership with existing limo companies. The thing I'd like to point out is, we don't employ any drivers. We don't own any cars. We are simply the conduit with which someone can actually request a trip through the app to get a ride. I do want to address a couple of points which have been brought up. The idea of public safety, we're all here for the same ultimate outcome, which is public safety of riders. The first is the background check. We do partner with limo drivers. So we go above and beyond the existing background checks that exist currently for Uber Black drivers. So, we're actually revamping our entire background check to include not only currently with the multi-state, but as well as federal. It is as extensive as you can imagine. And the same on UberX. They actually go through the exact same background check that we employ on Uber Black drivers. I will point out, in our experience, I can point to several examples of drivers who have partnered with us on Uber Black, or former taxi who have come over to partner on UberX or Uber Black, who have actually not, in fact, passed our background check. So I do want to point out that we go above and beyond, safety, again, as same for Lyft, is paramount. We spend a lot of time, resources, and money to making sure that these background checks are sufficient and that we ultimately protect the safety of our riders. The second point I want to touch on is the insurance. I know that that's been a point of contention, particularly for the insurance. Uber Black drivers obviously have to have the insurance as required by the state. For UberX, which is obviously the ride-sharing option, those drivers must have the minimum commercial insurance as required by the state. And then we also have a secondary and excess policy of $1 million for each trip, which is, again, above what the state requires for taxi as well as limousine. So I think the assertion that we don't value the idea of safety or the fact that we aren't, in full compliance on the insurance front, I think is materially false. And so I think that we've proven that given the amount of time, money, and resources that we've put into ensuring that everyone that takes a trip in one of these cars is protected. It includes liability as well as if there's an accident, Uber covers that as well. And the other thing I do want to point out is that Uber right now started almost 4 years ago. We're in over 70 cities around the world, 26 countries, 6 continents. We're on pretty much every magazine, TV show you've probably ever seen. We offer ride sharing in probably 30 plus of our markets on a global scale, and I would like to point out there is no state or county that we are currently in with UberX that requires this level of oversight on UberX. And we've continued to operate. We provided a great transportation alternative for metropolitan cities that we'd like to continue. I do appreciate the links that have gone to refashion what this bill is, but I think similar to Lyft as it stands, it's not something that we can actually accept. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has regarding our platform on Uber or UberX.
Thank you. I appreciate your statement. I'd like to add something and make a comment at this point. I know there's a great appreciation for what you do in your services, and there was never a question of what you are doing as a corporation. There are other companies that are startups that are not up to the same caliber of what you're doing. And I'd also like to just make a little statement that you said you're not having local governments. I would think this would be something to your benefit if the state would have regulations rather than to have to accommodate in every local municipality and county that you want to operate in. So we are trying to make this efficient and safe for the public and also to maybe cut some of the red tape you might face. But I appreciate your comments, and I do have several questions for you. Representative Atwood, do you have a question?
Mm-hmm. I'm a deep believer in, seek first up. So essentially, if I understood your testimony, your Uber acts, the best analogy I think I could give is like Expedia for hotels. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we are purely a technology mobile application. So as I said, we don't own any cars, employ any drivers. And so simply when someone wants to sign up for the app similar to Lyft, they download the app. It's a free app. And then once they're ready to request, they'll actually open up the app. They can actually see the ETA before they've even requested the trip. Once they've accepted the trip, they'll actually get a picture of their driver. They can actually track the driver on the phone. One of the things, I have a twin sister, and she takes Uber in New York. The idea of safety and transparency has been one of the greatest feedbacks that we've gotten on the system. People who before were standing on the street with their hands out in the middle of an unsafe neighborhood where they couldn't get a transportation or trip back. So taking that into account, that is extremely important for us. And so the fact that someone in the click of a button can actually get a trip like that anywhere in the world right now. We're in India, we're in Africa, we're in China. The fact that you can get that level of service, transparency, and safety is a great testament to what we've done.
One additional question, please, if I may. Certainly. Are your drivers essentially independent contractors?
They're fully independent contractors. So as I said, we don't employ a single driver. So any driver that partners with us, and I'll break it out into Uber, Uber Black, and UberX. Uber Black, those are drivers who currently have their chauffeur's permit. We inspect every single car. We're actually currently doing an audit for every partner, every driver that we partner with to inspect every single car. We require that they have the minimum insurance as required by the state on UberX as well as Uber Black. So there's no driver who is currently on our system that has not met the minimum requirements as required by the state and has not passed our stringent background check.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you. I have another question. Representative Holcomb.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's clear that we're increasingly moving into a sharing economy, not only for the ride service that you provide, but in other ways as well. Mm-hmm. The Economist had an article about that a few months ago, and it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, from both the Lyft and Uber perspectives, is that you're in the customer service industry. So if you don't fulfill your customers' desires, then you're not going to be successful. And if you don't maintain safety, if you don't provide transparency, and if you don't just protect yourselves in terms of the people that you're hiring, then it's not going to work. And so it seems to me like you already have enough safeguards within your business model to protect the public interest.
Exactly. And then one thing I would like to point out is for Uber in Atlanta, we actually are 10, I'm the general manager, but I have 8 people, currently 9 people in the office that work. So we employ people. We have community managers, we have driver operations managers who not only protect the interests of the people who take trips with Uber, but also ensure the quality on the driver operations side. So, similar to Lyft, at the end of each trip, everyone can actually rate the driver, lead feedback. We respond within 12 hours to any type of feedback that we get on the rider side, and any driver that doesn't actually meet the minimum requirements from professionalism to safety, we no longer partner with them. So we take that very seriously. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We have another question. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Love the concept. I have 2 questions, actually, and it may be in here, and I just didn't see it.
Okay.
The first question is, how often are you inspecting the vehicles? You say that you inspect them and you go through, what is a 17 or 19-point inspection. How often is that?
Yeah, so that the point inspection is the Lyft model, yeah.
Is the Lyft model,
yeah.
okay.
So currently, the way we operate, so we have, as I said, UberX and Uber Black. So every partner, we meet every person before they're even issued a phone to partner with us on our platform. So for Uber Black, we actually see every car. We make sure pretty much every driver that we partner with in Uber Black has the airport decal to pick up and drop off at the airport. We inspect inside the cars. We have a minimum age requirement for the cars that we partner with, which is 2007 and newer, which is actually moving up in the next 6 months to 2010 and newer, to ensure that the people that we partner with have the highest quality cars that are on the system. So again, that's our reputation. And so we take that, we've spent a lot of money and a lot of time has been invested to make sure that what we are doing is, again, 70 cities around the world, we can't take that level of risk. So we have put a lot of time and energy into making sure that what we do as a business meets all of those regulations.
So you do an initial inspection,
and then we're currently doing an audit right now in 3 weeks for every one of the people that we partner with.
Okay, and there's no,
it's a point inspection. Yep. So we go through the entire.
How often would you do that?
So currently we do them, we sometimes do them ad hoc. This is the first formal one where we've actually had every driver do it in. And again, that's part of the feedback system that we get from drivers. So say, for example, you take a trip, you don't enjoy the quality of the car, we get that feedback and we respond immediately.
Okay. One last question, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, please.
I'm sorry?
They have a different platform. They do
that. When you come back up, we'll get it. Let me.
Okay.
The other thing is I'm just curious. In the interest of public safety, and I understand what you said, this is the most strenuous state or bill that you guys had to deal with. But in the interest of public safety, why would you not want to have standard regulations as with any other transport company or provider? Why would you not want
Yeah, so ultimately, it's, we're open to regulatory structure, but the way we think about it is we need it to take into account the technology, competition, and how options are better. So it's not necessarily that we don't want to be regulated, but that regulation needs to take into account that level of technology and how it's changed the way people get from point A to point B. Uber and Lyft have really created an innovative platform for people to move about any city. They can get anywhere. Amsterdam, they can do boats on demand. So there's nothing that we haven't thought about in terms of how people can move about a city. And so if you think through, the way we think about it is, it's not that we don't want to be regulated, but that regulation needs to take into account the way our platform operates. And I know this bill has been redone, but as it stands now, it doesn't fully account for how we operate.
One last one. I understand that, and I know I understand that, but at the same time, why would you not want to ensure that real folks are being properly vetted through the agencies, the same agencies that any other taxi company or anything else would want to do? Nobody wants to stop you from moving, A to B. But my question is, how are we ensuring that we're moving safely and that the public safety is the utmost
Yeah, absolutely. And so we actually use a third party. I'm not sure the third party company that the cities and states use, but we also use a third party company. And as I said, there have been a number of instances where people who were vetted by the city or state who have not passed our background checks. And so, for us, I said we do take that very seriously, the level of background and insurance on the people that we partner with. But, we've, as I said, spent a lot of time, money, and resources into making sure that we have the highest quality of background checks, which in our experience in most of our markets has exceeded that required at the very minimum by those cities and states. So I do understand your concern, but yeah, as it's operated for us now, it's ensured that we've vetted drivers as thoroughly as possible.
Representative Blanton, I wanted to address some of the differences between the Lyft model. But first of all, if I can, I wanted to follow up on this gentleman's position because I failed to mention that we have a similar insurance program where we provide $1 million of insurance, which I believe is nearly, or actually a little bit more than 3 times what is statutorily required here in the state of Georgia. So I just wanted to ensure that you knew that the Lyft model follows that same practice of absolutely making sure that the passengers and that the public at large is fully protected when someone gets into a car with a Lyft driver. The 19-point inspection is part of the Lyft model. By way of background, if you'll excuse a bit of a brief story, when we first launched in California, the California Public Utilities Commission approached us. They likened us to limousines, to black cars, and they sent us an application that said, please let us know how many cars you own, please let us know how many drivers you employ. As the gentleman just explained, the same for us. We don't employ any drivers. They're independent contractors, and we don't own any cars. So we could not fill out that application. But once we sat down with the state of California, we were able to come up with a framework that, while different from their existing framework for vehicles for hire or for prearranged transportation, still accomplish the same safety and insurance goals. So I think to the point that he was making, that's an example of why we need to be careful to make sure that of how we try to accomplish these goals. If we try to do it the same way that it's always been done, it's jamming the square peg into the round hole, and that's why we are trying to be cautious about this bill here, because while it's, again, a huge step forward from where we started from, we just need to be careful that we are not trying to regulate an innovative new form of transportation in kind of the old school way.
Thank you very much. We have one more question. Representative Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is actually for the Uber representative, if you don't mind. I'm going to be referencing lines 149 through 176. My question is, currently, UberX, for instance, doesn't require what's in this portion, correct? We've already identified as the Lyft model, but would that be a correct statement?
Sorry, excuse me again.
149 through 176. It's basically the
point,
inspection, essentially.
The point
yes.
check. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're currently doing that now on all of the UberX partners and as well as Uber Black partners that we are partnering with.
Okay, so you already currently do that then?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. All right. And just
we don't use the same one, but yes, very similar.
Okay. And more of a broader question now, I guess. Would this bill from, I know it's a newer version from what you've seen, but would this negatively impact y'all's business model from what you see?
Yes.
Would you say that it could put you out of business?
I mean, Uber, it's a big company. It
Right.
would materially affect
within the state of Georgia.
Within the
yes.
state of Georgia, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have a question?
I do. Gentleman from Uber. Now, let me ask you, you've seen the bill, and I understand you haven't been in on the discussions. You had your lobbyist that's been up here talking for y'all. You just gave the gentleman an answer. You said you think there's some stuff in here that materially would hurt your business. Could you spell those out specifically?
Yep. So I've just seen this bill about 30 minutes ago, so the abridged version.
Please feel free to tell me exactly what could materially hurt your business that might put you out of business, because I'm certainly willing to please. and have been from the start of this whole debate. Is there anything here would stop a driver from working with y'all? Is there anything in here that charges any extra fees or taxes of an outrageous amount?
Well, I mean, the people who currently partner with us on UberX aren't paying any fee. And so, UberX drivers are generally part-time, similar to Lyft. They're part-time people who are trying to make extra money. So charging them an additional fee, which they currently aren't paying, would definitely affect.
Can you show me in this bill where they're paying an extra fee?
So the original ones are, as I said, I only read this one about 30 minutes ago. They were initially having to pay if they partnered with a referral
Not the
company.
original bill. Like I said, you've had an opportunity to come up and discuss the process. I'm talking about the bill that you're looking at.
Yep.
We have been, pardon me, but I've been on record for the last 3 or 4 committee meetings of reaching out to Uber and to anyone else that's in the business to come forward to help us draft a bill, a substitute. This is the product. There's nothing in this bill that charges any extra fees. These referral services are expected to pay the $100 annually so that they can then report to the Department of Public Safety who's doing the driving. There's no driver fees.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go through this one in more detail, and I can actually get back to you.
Well, we're here today, and you gave an answer that there's materially, this bill might hurt your business, and this is what I want to know.
I would feel more comfortable spending a little more time reading this bill that I got 30 minutes ago and giving you a more thorough answer.
Second question. In the bill, and I understand, and I applaud, I think I said it quite frankly, I was very impressed. I'm very impressed with the service. I do have a concern that y'all have, from what I heard you say as I was standing over here a minute ago, was that yes, y'all do a great background check. You do all these wonderful things, but you said it was almost like you flipped your nose at the fact that the state still has a responsibility to ensure the public safety. Do you think that maybe we should privatize the state's functions into ensuring security of these different things? We're not trying to do things that are going to hurt you because we basically put it in here 2 different ways. That you're not having to pay for background checks since y'all already do them. So do you feel that maybe the state should just say, butt out and let y'all do what you want to do, as well as any of your competition that may come in the future?
What I am saying is that the current background checks that we do issue have been, in several instances, stricter than what the state has done. And so, I'm not going to sit here and pontificate whether or not we should privatize. That's not really what this is about. So I'm not going to make a statement on that because I don't think that affects what this bill is trying to do.
No, it's exactly what this bill does. This bill is about public safety.
The bill is not about privatization of
no, this bill is about public safety. And I'm not trying to be argumentative about the fact, and I agree. I have agreed totally that y'all do a great job in doing your background checks. The point I'm making is there anything in this bill that's overbearing enough that would hurt your business model by saying that the State Department of Public Safety should have a report of the people that are actually driving?
It's different from the question you just asked, but I would say that, if we do the background checks, and so, we're totally fine with the state continuing to do it for UberX, and we do it in addition. My point is that we've done background checks on X of people who were background checked from taxi or previously black, who have not passed our background checks. And so at this current state, based on our experience, that we feel more comfortable with the background checks that we are currently employing.
Still not answering the question, though, if I may be kind enough to just ask. We're accepting what y'all are doing.
Yeah, so I guess
we're accepting what y'all are doing as a background check.
Yep.
But what I'm asking is, by virtue of y'all reporting and being on record to the department and signing that affidavit that y'all have done to the best of your knowledge, that driver is a safe driver that has no felony convictions. I mean, we're accepting that. So I guess my question I'm asking is, how is this creating an obstacle to y'all doing business?
So I could definitely get back to you on that.
If I may ask one more question to both firms. My understanding is that in some states, California, y'all register with the Public Service Commission in California. Y'all register. Can you tell me, do y'all register in California?
I can't speak to every state, whether or not we do that. Are you asking specifically for California, or are you asking every state?
Well, I mean, I understand.
Just California, yes. I can't say for every single state, but California, yes.
So y'all do register, and y'all are licensed or regulated or whatever by the state of California?
As a lead generation technology company, that's how we are licensed in California.
And do they charge y'all a fee to register with them?
I can check on that. I'm not 100% certain.
So I guess what the point I'm getting to is that the general attitude is that we do a great job, which is nothing that we're saying that either one of your companies aren't doing a good job, but it's this attitude that, you know, we don't want anything to do that the state has no right in telling us or to basically scrutinize what we're doing for the safety of the citizens of Georgia. But you're already doing it in California, as I understand. And I don't know about other states. Can you tell me, sir, do y'all, any other states?
I mean, we use the same background check company across all of our markets. So I'm not sure if...
No, now I'm on a different subject now. I'm talking about generally, y'all are dealing with government. Government does regulate y'all in at least one state I know about, California. But any other states that you know of, I'm sorry, is there any other states that you know of?
Okay. To the best of my knowledge, California is the only state where we're registered and it's an official process. That process is underway in other states, but because this is so new, and since California was the first place where this began, they were the first state to put in, to the best of my knowledge, we're the first state to put in an official process for this. There's a temporary rule and a temporary process in the District of Columbia as well, and then rules are being promulgated across the country. But again, since this is so new, California is the only state. And just as a quick point, the current rule in California is temporary. It's literally going to become permanent any single day now. And so I just want to make sure that I'm not being unclear about that. It's about to become a permanent rule.
So then help me with this then. In California, y'all register with the Utilities Commission in California.
Correct.
What do they do in California by registering? Is it just a registration mechanism, or is it so that y'all put your, so that the drivers are basically on a roster in California? I mean, what is the process in California?
So we register there as what is called a Transportation Network Company, or a TNC. They will issue a permit. Right now we're operating under a temporary agreement. Our application is in. We expect the permit any day now. I want to be careful about this because our regulatory attorney in California handles this, but to the best of my knowledge, it is basically done on a kind of an audit basis, that if the state of California wants to check something of ours, whether it's the background checks, what have you, they have the right to do that on a periodic basis, and we will provide them with that information. I am not 100% certain about that, but that's the best of my knowledge. That's how the process in a broad sense works in California.
So then you might say by the work that you've done on this bill and having looked at this bill, pretty near what we've done in this handiwork is pretty well what I have been saying for the last 3 or 4 weeks. That the only thing we're doing is that we think that the background needs to be put forward to the state of Georgia to ensure that those people who are driving are not convicted felons, have a decent record. Pretty near, would that be pretty near correct?
I think there's no question about their motivation. I think our motivation is the same. The only one thing I'll say is just again, because I do not speak as the legal counsel for my company, that I would obviously want to, some of these changes were made literally just hours ago, so I would want the legal counsel. But there's no question that that is the intent, And I think we are getting, at the very least, I can say we're getting closer to something that is workable.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more representative. Representative Cook, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Alec, it's Representative Atwood.
In my continual quest to understand this phenomenon, Mr. Massey or Mr. Radford, either one, when a person like me downloads the app, wants to request an Uber driver, I would give my credit card in. Please correct me if I'm misstating this. I would give my credit card information to your mothership, to the headquarters, to the Uber corporate headquarters, I guess, in California. Is that correct?
It's stored on a third-party secure server.
Third-party secure server, and then you would assign a driver to me to pick me up down at the Sheraton or wherever I was. And how are they paid?
The drivers for each trip. So the trip is based on a combination of distance and time. And so the drivers basically receive the full remittance of the payment, and then Uber receives a percentage of that as a service fee for partnering with us.
I wanted to be sure, 80%, 20%, whatever it was. And so, but you don't have a similar donation set up as does Lyft?
No, it's not a donation model. Yep.
Set fee,
Yep.
right?
And it's fully transparent on the website as well as in the app.
Okay, I assume that. I just wanted to be sure.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I would ask now if there's anyone from Public Safety that would like to speak.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Captain Johnny Jones, Department of Public Safety. And I'd just like to mention the fact that over the last 20 years, limousine carrier, black car services has been tightly regulated. And we have always, in some form or fashion, whether it was at Public Service Commission, Department of Motor Vehicle Safety, or Department of Public Safety, verified the safety of the drivers by background checks, by verifying the safety of the vehicles by performing vehicle inspections, and making sure that they had adequate levels of financial responsibility. This has been the foundation for limousine carrier safety in Georgia, like I said, for 20 years. And that's basically, if I'll entertain any questions about how we've done business on that over the years.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have a question? Thank you, sir. Okay. Come next, please.
I'll defer to the
Good morning, committee. My name is Cedric.
It's almost.
I've had a long day as well, so please excuse me.
It is almost morning.
My name is Cedric Burson. I currently regulate taxicab for the City of Atlanta and other vehicles for hire. And I am just here to speak on behalf of the City of Atlanta. And if I had to say anything, I would say that one of the primary concerns that we have is simply that how do you describe a taxi cab or a taxi meter? What is that definition? And so if right now the City of Atlanta regulates taxi cabs and we regulate fares, so they can't charge an excessive fare. They can't charge based on demand. If it's a high demand, they still got to get the exact same fee for the same service. The taxi meter, which similar to what the algorithms or some of the algorithms in the phone services, does time plus distance as well. And so our position is, how are we going to be able to separate between a taxi cab or a taxi meter or a taxi service than a regular UberX service or a regular Lyft service in that same area? And so that's what I would ask you to consider as you're taking a look at this bill and the way it's currently set up. Thank you.
Thank you. If you do you want to speak or? Yeah, all right.
Good evening.
Will you wait up here? I think we may have some
Yes.
questions.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Ron Fennell. Many of you know me of the Georgia Hotel and Lodging side of the equation that I've represented for 19 years here. But I'm here today in combination. We've worked through the hotel industry with the taxi cab drivers, the owners, the limo drivers, the regulators at all levels for the past couple of years on trying to solve a conundrum at the local government level on some of the emerging technologies, but also aspects of regulatory schemes that may be in need of review and improvement. Like the chairman, whom I applaud for taking on this endeavor to ensure public safety for all Georgians, and I think that is in essence it in a nutshell is the responsibility that all of you as a member of the Public Safety Committee are charged with. In another role, I serve as the Public Safety Chairman in the City of Smyrna as a City Councilman in my civic duties. 22 years ago, I sat where you are, and I had the privilege of serving on a lot of committees. I never had a chance and a privilege to serve on this committee, but I will tell you that public safety is incumbent upon all members of the General Assembly to protect on behalf of the citizens of Georgia, and I applaud you for taking on this mission and this issue. For that, personally, as a Georgian, I thank you, and I thank the chairman for offering it. As Mr. Burst just said, a metering device that measures time, whatever the algorithm, whatever term you want to use, this is a metering device if you do time and distance. That falls, therefore, by definition, under rules you guys set up as a state of Georgia that you granted to the local governments to set up a metering device and is therefore charged under the taxi cab rules of the road and ordinance and enforcement. Insurance is important. I left you a letter that you've seen. I won't rehash that, but I did want to point out there was a reference made to Expedia, and Representative Atwood, I think you captured in essence it as a comparable baseline type of service. I applaud technology. I have 3 iPhones in my family, 2 iPads, an iMac. We're all, in the modern era, enjoying a revolution. It's awesome. Companies I represent have their own apps. Checker Cab in Atlanta has a great app that I use if I need to use a taxi cab service. I'm confident in the quality of their service, their drivers, the inspection. I know the company, I know the firm, I know the individuals. Other people have taken advantage of these new services, which is great. I think you have options in the marketplace. We still have a law in the state of Georgia, and the law is there for a purpose, to protect the public safety. There's a regulatory scheme set in place by the General Assembly and then granted to its subdivision, the cities and the counties across the state. Those are in place. There are costs embedded in doing business in those, as both he and Captain Jones said, a regulated environment. It's a heavily regulated environment for a reason. It is a public safety trust that we as policymakers have taken on as our responsibility. And as the commissioner knows, over time, you can't let that one exception to the rule drive you, but you have to make sure that you're protecting every single one, every single Georgian. And I hope that you take this bill as seriously as the intent of the chairman's initiative to offer this. He has been more than accommodating for everybody who is involved. And it's nice to have a company that's an innovator, and we need those. We need innovators at all levels, and there are more coming. Trust me, there are more coming. I applaud that. I welcome that. Georgia is a very proud technology-embracing state. But at the same time, just obey the law and obey the rules. If you can't do that, and I think this bill goes out of the way to legitimize, to show good faith, and to ask everybody to play by the same rules. If you do that, there isn't anybody out here, taxi cab drivers, taxi cab owners, limo drivers, limo companies, who would have any problem. Competition is a part of their daily life. They're okay with competition. As with Expedia, just as the example to refer back to Representative Atwood, our hotel association many years ago had challenges with Expedia because they were buying rooms from our hotels, then remitting and selling them to the end user. We pay our taxes on the 20th of the month religiously every month on hotel motel tax for the room as we sold it. The company, Expedia, as a specific example, was selling the room, but they wouldn't pay a tax on the difference. The city of Columbus sued, went all the way to the Georgia Supreme Court. The ruling was favorable to the city of Columbus that sales tax and hotel tax has to be paid. The city of Atlanta followed with another lawsuit, joined in by Rome and others. That suit was won. Expedia is paying taxes now, but they weren't before. And you got to appreciate a technology innovator like Expedia or Hotels.com or any of the others. But folks, you're doing business in Georgia. Pay your taxes, obey the rules, live within the confines of what the Georgia legislature has established as the law. And that's all that I think Chairman Powell is asking for here is, yeah, we applaud the new technology. We also applaud everybody who obeys the law, performs their proper function, and pays their taxes.
Thank you, sir. I do have a question. Representative Atwood?
Sorry, but being an equal opportunity abuser, Mr. Burson, if maybe you can address it. I'm interested in the taxi cab industry now, and I have been told that you issue medallions, correct?
We issue certificate of public necessity and convenience, no medallion.
And how much does that cost?
Currently, they're about $54,000 a piece.
So for a person to be able to operate a taxi, he or she has to pay $54,000?
Yes, sir, per taxi.
Per taxi. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have a question.
Please. If I might ask, part of my interest in this and what I'd said about this study committee is about possibly deregulating. So this $54,000 for this certificate, that's per taxi or for a company?
Well, currently the city of Atlanta has 1,600 CPNCs that they have legislated to be sold, and right now there is 1,554 currently. 1,555 that are currently out there that are owned or that are in the possession of individual owners and or those companies.
So they pay you that amount just to run one taxi?
No, sir. They do not pay us. The certificate of public necessities were sold back in 95, 96, and they were sold at that time, I think, for about $100. And over the years, they have increased in value to right now they are valued at about $54,000 market value. If you were in New York, a medallion is over $1 million to drive one taxi cab. If you were in Chicago, it's about $500,000 or $600,000 to drive a taxi cab. So if you're in the medallion market where you're selling them for a price, or they are selling for a price, they continually go up.
So if we deregulate this industry, the folks that are holding these taxi certificates to run a taxi, is somebody going to pay them back that money? Is the city of Atlanta?
I can't answer that. I'm not in a position to answer that.
Who originally sold this as a bartering tool? The city of Atlanta sold these original certificates?
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
But it was granted by, of course, the legislature, the state.
So by deregulating, does that put you out of a job?
Possibly. Probably.
Thank you.
Representative Atwood has another question.
I want to be sure I understand. So the city of Atlanta issued certificates of public necessity a few years ago for $100. And they haven't reissued any more?
No, sir.
So obviously they get more and more valuable.
Yes, sir.
So if the city of Atlanta would issue a independent business person a certificate, or issue a number of them, it would drive the price down. Is that correct?
I can't speculate on that, but generally I can tell you what has happened in Chicago and New York. Each year they do issue new medallions, but the prices don't go down. They continue to rise.
I see. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We have one more. Thank you, sir. If you'd come up, public safety.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And
previous versions of this bill, there was a significant financial impact upon the Department of Public Safety for regulatory. Being this bill came out so late, we were not able to thoroughly review the bill so far to see how much of a financial impact any regulatory authority would be giving back to the Department of Public Safety. And we've just simply asked that there would be some type of physical note added to it if it comes back for us for regulatory authority that the personnel that we have in our regulatory unit is so taxed right now. If we add any additional things to them, we would have to have additional personnel to vet list or whatever else that may come out of this. And that's simply all that we ask. We're definitely for public safety. We think that is definitely the biggest issue that needs to be taken care of, and we're on board with the public safety aspect.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone have questions for him? Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one thing. I know that we talked about the regulated environment that is taxi cabs in the city of Atlanta specifically, and just realize that some of these costs are borne by the companies that obeyed the law as the law was put in place and as it has continued to be a regimen, not to the fault of the companies that are actually exercising as law-abiding companies, but they do have costs that a person coming in from out of state with a non-regulated app doesn't have to bear. And just recognize that that is a part of reality. These are companies that have been doing business like Checker Cab for over 60 years in the city, for a specific example. And these companies have borne the regulatory costs of inspections, which are twice a year mandated by the city. They have to pay each driver fee. They have to pay the medallion. They have to maintain upkeep. And they have to have driver training, mandatory within the city. So those are elements that are built-in infrastructure, sunk costs that are mandated by the local regulated environment for these vehicles. I didn't want that to escape your attention as well.
Thank you very much. I would, one thing that we forgot to mention earlier, which is one of the favorite things of our chairman, is brevity. And we've sort of left that out tonight. We do have some folks that want to speak. And I will tell you, it is late in the evening. I'm going to limit each person to 2 minutes. That's the maximum time you have to speak. And I will call you up in the order that is on the list. Greg Williams.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Williams. I am the chairman of the Buckhead Young Republicans. Also employed in the mortgage industry, and I've also driven part-time for UberX. I wanted to let you guys know real quick, I was able to find two things that would currently put Uber and Lyft out of business. If you'll refer to line number 220, and it's page 7 of the new bill, the hot off the presses bill that nobody really had a chance to review, but you know, we've been able to read since not everybody's participated in brevity. Line 220, where it talks about the use of internet or cell phone software to calculate rates shall not be permitted unless such software complies with and conforms to the weights and measure standards of the local government that licenses such taxi service. Well, folks, that's what the technology is. It's a cell phone, and it uses the internet and GPS. So by eliminating that and by putting that under the purview of a local county ordinance, that would put Uber and Lyft out of business. So there's one line right there. There's another part where Uber and Lyft are not able to just pick up people off the street. We can't just hang out in parking lots and have a big sign on or hang out outside of bars or after a ball game or something like that. Excuse me, sir, it's not a lie. The biggest difference between Uber and Lyft is they are ordered through a conduit, through a smartphone application. It's by two consenting individuals. And somebody goes to pick up, they give them a ride. And if I picked up somebody in Decatur and I drove them to Buckhead, I would then be able to take another fare from Buckhead somewhere else. This makes fuel far more efficient. It increases rider happiness. And frankly, it makes making money a little bit more easier in that business. With the taxi cab model, somebody that picks somebody up from the airport and drives them to Dunwoody would have to then go back to the airport. They would not be able to pick up somebody in Dunwoody unless they also paid DeKalb County and City of Dunwoody fees. This is a very inefficient model. That should be the question y'all are looking at, is deregulating that to level the playing field and not punish successful technology companies like Uber and Lyft that have built the better mousetrap. And finally, I'll end with this. To see 5 Republicans sponsor this bill when we run under the platform of limited government and lower regulation, to put your names on this bill that would put these companies out of business and limit transportation options, especially when we just had Snow Jam 2, where it was a zombie apocalypse outside, is outrageous. And I am shocked and embarrassed to see 5 Republicans on this name. I ask y'all to reconsider this. I heard so many questions. Some of y'all don't even understand the platform. So please, take a little time, read the new bill.
Thank you
Give
for
some
your
of these
comment.
folks time to read the
Your
new bill.
time is up, but
Thank
I
you,
do
ma'am.
need to correct you. Line 220 applies only to taxis. It does not apply. When you read the bill, you will see it applies to taxi services only. It does not apply to Uber, Lyft, and those share rides. So you have that incorrect. Thank you. Your time is up.
All right, thank you.
Next would be Adam Hinchcliffe. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Adam Hinchcliffe, and I'm just coming as a blind Georgian. Oftentimes, our community is not the forefront of any discussion, especially in terms of evolving technologies and things. And I'm just coming to give my impressions of Uber. Unfortunately, I have not had the pleasure of utilizing Lyft yet, but I plan to change that in the near future. I have used MARTA and the regulated taxi industry in the past for transportation. We have a transportation crisis in Georgia, and we especially have a transportation crisis in the city of Atlanta. Even people who are fully functional and able to drive have great difficulties completing simple transportation tasks. You magnify that times a billion for those of us who are not fortunate to be able to drive. MARTA's extent is very limited. Oftentimes, for me, the taxi industry is you have to go through a dispatcher. They find out you're disabled. They put you on hold. They don't understand where you are. And it's just been very, very difficult over the years to utilize taxi services. So I'd always been able to use the MARTA trains when I could, and then I would rely on friends to pick me up and complete my journey. Then all of a sudden, this new system comes along called Uber, and I didn't use it for a long time because I really didn't understand it. I think, like a lot of people in this room, it seems, are not understanding this new technology, but we're rushing to regulate it. I'm not giving an opinion on that. I am just saying, for me as a blind Georgian, how I feel and how Uber has changed my life, because it's an integral part of my transportation system now. I use MARTA when I can, and then Uber completes my journey. The app is fully accessible with screen readers. I'm able to calculate my cost and generate a cost to where I'm going from point A to point B. I am printed an automatic receipt that is texted or emailed to my phone that is able to be read by the screen reader. And I don't exchange cash. Many blind people do not carry cash because the currency is not able to be distinguishable. There is no tactile display. There's not even tactile display in this building, let alone on our currency. So you can see some of the problems that we face as a community. And Uber and Lyft and these new emerging technologies have really filled a void in Atlanta that people are able to get around, in some cases many times for the first time. So I am just stating that this bill is troublesome to me. I do understand that it is being processed and that things are evolving, but I urge you to please consider the ramifications. Don't snap judge this technology. Let it play out. I can tell you that, at least from the disability community, many times these new technologies, they're having to play catch up for us. But for Uber, definitely, it is 100% accessible. I feel secure and safe. The drivers are courteous. They will not let you create another ride until you have filled out a customer service form stating their ratings and things. And so I'm just saying that God bless Uber and Lyft. This is why we have innovation. This is why our country is the best in the world. And I really hope that we can come to some sort of general conclusion of a way to make sure that there is a level playing field. But it sounds to me like preliminarily the issue here is we need less deregulation rather than more. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Rabbi Patrick Beaulieu.
Good evening. What used to be afternoon when we got here at 2 o'clock and now have 2 minutes to speak. 3 issues. Number 1, more government does not equal more security. Number 2, this hurts our economic security. And number 3, it hurts our personal security. Let's talk about government. More government does not necessarily mean more security. This issue has been turned into taxi cabs versus mobile apps. And let's remember that. Uber and Lyft are not taxi cab services. They are software based. They are apps. Okay? Let's remember that because that's very important. So, in theory, if government is good at regulating and keeping things safe, then something that's ran by the government should be safe. I don't use taxis, but I do use Uber and Lyft. The other thing I use is MARTA. Right? MARTA should be safe because it's regulated by the government. So let's look at last fiscal year. 593 examples of aggravated assault, robbery, auto theft, larceny, arson, and burglary. All on MARTA, which is ran by the government. How many examples of that? I defer to the gentleman who represents Uber and Lyft. I think there was about 10 over the course of 2 years. This is just fiscal year, last year. Let's think about that. Number 2, economic security. Uber and Lyft were referred to as, in this committee tonight, these people who aren't from here. These people who aren't from here. And although I appreciate the gentleman from Lyft, he referred to this legislation as close to workable. Okay, close to workable, and these people who are not from here is not a good economic precedent for our state. Matter of fact, our governor is about to go to Israel, and I'm biased in favor of Israel. I really love the idea that Israel's going to come here. I'm a little prejudiced, as you can tell. But why are we spending millions of dollars to bring companies in here from foreign countries, people who aren't from here, but then people who aren't from here who create amazing products that serve our needs are being regulated? It's an interesting question. And then finally, personal security. I've had the opportunity to meet wonderful, hardworking, middle-class families who use Uber and Lyft as income. Right? Matter of fact, the gentleman who works for the Young Republicans gave me a ride. I found out we're neighbors. And you know what he did? He offered to give me a ride home tonight. We've created community, all of us, as customers, as people who work for Uber and Lyft, as contractors, as drivers. We've created a community for each other, a meaningful community. And as a faith leader, I believe in community. I don't believe in more government. I don't believe in hurting our economy. And I certainly don't believe in passing legislation that we don't even understand. Do you know what an SMS is? Do you know what a push notification is? That's what Uber and Lyft use. That's what they're about. And if we don't understand those things, let's do one of 2 things. Let's either deregulate, 2 times said by the gentleman who wrote this, and also another thing let's think about, if we're not going to deregulate, it's my last point, I promise, takes 2 seconds, let's just kill the bill. Let's just kill the bill. Let's go home. Let's go back to our constituencies. Let's give it a year. Let's give it a year, see how it goes, and then let's come back when we're smarter and understand this better. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless Uber and Lyft and the rideshare community.
Thank you, but I have a question for you. Yes. Representative Talton.
I'm getting him a free ride home.
Yes, we've actually become very good friends, and I wish he was Jewish because I want him to come to my synagogue.
Rabbi.
We can't all be perfect, I guess. He also does bar mitzvahs. I'm sorry. A little brevity is nice when you've had people who've been waiting here for 5 hours. Let's go. What's the question?
Rabbi, due to all respect, people who are not from here,
sure,
when they come here, don't you think they're supposed to obey our rules and regulations of the states where they're coming from, which we have to do if we
sure,
go to their place?
Sure.
That's the only comment I want to make.
Sure.
To clarify that.
Sure. You know, part of it could be sensitivity on my part, and here's why. My people, for a long time, were called those people who aren't from here, who may not follow the rules. So when I hear someone refer to anyone as those people, I get very nervous.
Well, you can understand why I can make a statement like I made too.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Next on the list is Ron Fennell. You're done? Okay. Karen Brimmer.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Chairman Powell and Vice Chairwoman Taylor and committee members. I am not here speaking on. I'm not here speaking for Uber or for the taxis. I represent the Georgia Restaurant Association, which represents over 400 employees here in the state of Georgia, 10% of the workforce. We have over 16,000 locations, and this year we will do $16.5 billion in sales. I have received many telephone calls and many emails from concerned members and employees about this whole issue. Our member restaurants here in the Atlanta metro area feel very strongly that the Uber model has been a very positive experience for residents and guests in our city, and we feel that it has helped to make our restaurants safer. People are relying more and more on Uber because it is a safe, reliable product. You place the order with, as everybody has explained, you place your order, you see a picture of the driver, you see the driver's license, the license plate number, the transaction is completely handled over the internet, and when you need a car to pick you up, you get a car to pick you up. You are not waiting for hours for a dispatch that maybe nobody wants to go into that area to pick up somebody. So our industry supports Uber, and we would hope that you would create rules and laws that would protect the people of Georgia, protect our employees, protect our visitors, have people be responsible for their taxes and for licensing, but let's make it so that everybody can play in the same field and in the same sandbox together. And I definitely support the folks that have been getting together to negotiate on this, but let's make sure that we can keep the system of all these different types of transportation, but keeping them safe and allowing them to compete against each other. Any questions?
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you very much. Ralph Constantine.
Hello, my name is Ralph Constantine. I am the one-week interim president of the Atlanta Taxi Association. The reason why there wasn't a taxi representative because the guy resigned. It's been about 6 months before they had the election. I'm the new one. I represent over 1,600 active drivers, about 1,200 inactive drivers. We're not anywhere in trying to put anybody out of business. We don't care what they run. They can run it. We don't have a problem with it. We just say make it a level playing field. People have choices. People have choices. I ride Prince Fielder. I ride Joey Votto. I ride Roger Staubach. I rode Joe Namath. Okay? I've rode a lot of people in 20-something years of cab driving who would not get in a limo. Tony Dorsett, he would not get in one because it would get him, people converge on him. Everybody has a choice. My situation is make it safe for everybody in Georgia. This insurance situation is out of hand. Yes, they have a blanket policy, but the blanket policy does not cover that individual driver. If that individual driver has a wreck, an Uber driver has a wreck in a limo, who's going to be covered there? The blanket covers them on something. But this is the things that we got to deal with. The insurance is a blanket, and here we talk about this. The Lyft says they have the minimal for the state requirement, but that minimal state requirement is personal. It is not commercial. We as cab drivers pay a lot of money for commercial insurance where we do not have personal insurance. If that's the case, I go take my 2009 Dodge Caravan and start picking up people with an app. I can make an app myself. Anybody can make an app, and I could go out there and pick up people if that's the case. I have to have commercial insurance. I got to have commercial insurance. And this is what's got to be done. These background checks has got to be done now. And they talk about background checks. Well, guess what, you go back and do your background check again. Because you have a Louisiana, I served 30 years in Louisiana, I served 15 years in the taxi industry. You got a Louisiana sex offender driving for your company. So go back to your background checks. Background checks need to be done now. Not give them 60 days to go do something. They should be done now. They should be given a background check and not be given out on the street or permitted to go on the street until they pass that background check.
I have a question, one question.
Very quickly, Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Are sex offenders allowed to operate taxi cabs? I'm just curious.
Ma'am?
Sex offenders. Are they allowed to operate a taxi?
No,
I'm just
no. And another thing they talking about nobody does these street hailing. I guarantee you go to any hotel right now in the city of Atlanta, and you see if somebody ain't sitting out in front of the hotels in a limo. You come to Virginia Highland on any Friday and Saturday night and see if you don't see these little lipsticks running around without an order that picks up people because they wave at them because they know they're lifted, they buy donation. So I challenge you on all of that. I challenge anyone on that.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, Russi Patel. Oh.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman, Chairwoman, rather. Rushi Patel with the Georgia Municipal Association. I'm going to be really quick. This has been a long process, and I think I've seen y'all more than I've seen my new wife in the last few weeks, so we'll get out of here. We believe this is a public safety bill, and the newest iteration of the bill, there's public safety aspects that create a floor for public safety on these types of vehicles. And we support that because we think that public safety is as paramount importance to our cities and what goes on in our cities. Those who have been involved in this process know that we had one question throughout the process and related to how you're going to keep track of all these transportation referral services and how you're going to make sure that the taxis are paying, taxis, transportation referral services, whatever, are paying taxes and uses. This final version of the bill has a great solution to that and creates a study committee. And so I think this bill as it is moving forward in the right direction, and it's a good way to end the night, I think. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, if you would like to come and give your closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and ladies
Brevity.
and gentlemen.
We remember brevity, your favorite word.
I will.
Thank you.
You know, I want to thank each and every member for the time they put in on this, and some special thanks. I want to thank the Vice Chair of the committee. I want to thank Alex Atwood. I want to thank Dusty, who was here earlier, a member of the committee. You know, they spent a good bit of time working on this bill. When I had introduced it, and because of the level of negative discourse that was being put out, I had turned this over to members of the committee to be sure that they were seeing the same thing I was seeing. I want to thank the people with the limo industry. I want to thank Mr. Marsh and his clients and at Lyft. I even want to thank the folks who are representing Uber. You know, they have made a veiled attempt to come to the table to talk to us. They've missed some of it, but they're hired to represent their clients. I will tell you that I'm quite, and I'm not going to say I'm disappointed. I'll go back to what I said originally. We're living in a changing society. The changing society is all based on technology. This idea of cell phone, smartphone technology is producing some wonderful things. The one thing that I thought was great, there was a common thread, if nothing else, was how great technology is that it's providing. The gentleman here on the front bench. We have a better mode of transportation that is serving Georgians. It's even probably making the taxi cab industry a better industry because of it. Because quite frankly, and I don't know anything about it because I sure didn't know that a coupon was $54,000. But I will tell you what it has done. It will either make the taxi industry better or they will go the way of a rotary dial telephone. And I believe that. I believe that those of us in rural Georgia are going to be the beneficiary of the Lyfts and the UberX's and the other companies that will come after. But I still say, if you look at this legislation, the product of a lot of work and a lot of hours of folks in the industry of all sides, we're not regulating. What we're doing is we're saying that the Department of Public Safety should know who is out there driving. We've made the accommodation to these folks that we're willing to take the word and let them do a sworn affidavit that these drivers have been through their rigid background checks. We've made all the accommodations possible. So there's no, quote, issues in here that's going to put anybody out of business. You know, we heard from some of the folks up here that unfortunately was a little bit over the top, I guess, for no better term. But that's the enthusiasm. That's the enthusiasm of the process. People don't read the newspapers anymore the way they once did in some of our generations. They don't actually talk. They pick up the phone and they get an app, or they get something buzzed into them. But you know, I think that you all, each and every one of you here, know what the intent is. And I will ask this committee, if it is the will of this committee to move this forward. If it's not the will of the committee, then hold it. Quite frankly, I mean, you know, I've got a lot of things that I can do, but I want to finish this with one statement to you. I realized early on that this was not going to be an easy subject because we're talking about a new day. We're talking about the technology. And I saw the negative ads. I saw these entertainers, the Neil Borches and them, who just read my obituary. I heard the guy here who was talking about the shamefulness that we have Republicans who dare to put their name on such a bill. But these Republicans didn't put their name on a bill to regulate anybody. They put their names on a bill in the name of public safety, which at the end of the day, that is our first responsibility, to provide public safety for the citizens of this state. Quite frankly. Well, this gentleman right here, he needs to know that whoever he goes and whatever app he uses, that he has a driver that is not a convicted felon, that has a good driving record. To the lady over here a while ago, she doesn't need to have a fear that when she calls up someone to come get her, that there might be a little checkeredness in that person's background. We're not telling them there's nothing. I'd ask questions to one of the gentlemen with one of the companies. And quite frankly, I wonder how many folks really can go through this stuff. But ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the bill, you know what's there. I would ask for your consideration. If you have any changes, and make them. I would ask for you to stand with me and we go forward, because this is a public safety issue. Because I am convinced, ladies and gentlemen, you do what you want to do. This bill may not pass, but it's already, one thing has been proven to me, that when the day comes that there is an incident, that somebody's wife, somebody's daughter, somebody's child that may have some kind of criminal act perpetrated, or if there's an auto accident and there hadn't been insurance or whatever, and then the public becomes irate, as we know they do, and when they point the finger and they say, what in the world have you folks been doing? Why didn't y'all take a look to see that we were being protected? Ladies and gentlemen, I would appreciate your consideration on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I think Chairman Talton has something.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that House Bill 907 do pass substitute.
Do I hear a second? I hear a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
No.
It passes. Congratulations. With one no.